Evening. Good evening, everybody. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, and it looks like it is 6:04. All right. I'll call the October 8th, 2024 regular Planning and Zoning Commission for the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque to order. We'll do the roll call. Commissioner Barrow?
Here.
Commissioner Martinez?
Here.
Commissioner Edward? Here. Commissioner Baldwin?
Here.
Commissioner Tagliapetra?
Here.
Commissioner Haywood?
Yeah.
And Commissioner Homan here. Let the record reflect that the quorum is present for the meeting. On to the approval of the agenda. Director Hill, are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, staff proposes no change to the agenda.
All right, is there a motion for approval?
So I move we approve the agenda as offered.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. I guess we must do a roll call. Commissioner Barrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez?
Yes.
Commissioner Edward?
Yes.
Commissioner Baldwin?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagliapetra?
Yes.
Commissioner Haywood?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here.
For the agenda?
Just approve.
We're just approving the agenda.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the minutes. Yes.
Great, and Commissioner Haywood, yes. Okay, so the motion carries unanimously. On to the public comment period. Residents may address the Planning and Zoning Commission to comment on issues, problems, or successes on topics that do not appear elsewhere on the agenda. Audience members will be given an opportunity to comment on the agenda items as they come up. Speakers must register with the village staff prior to the beginning of the meeting. And can I have a list of the names who signed up to speak? Great. As I call your name, you can come to the podium. Speakers will have 3 minutes. Before we start that, should we go ahead and, no, we'll wait until we get, for swearing everybody in, we'll wait until we get to the regular. Okay, super. All right, so the first one is Camille Varro.
And I requested a remote microphone. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
If you will state your name and address for the record, please.
Absolutely. Camille Vados, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico, 87107. I have commented on culture, agricultural settings in our village, and it doesn't seem to matter, but it matters to me. And so I'm going to talk about, or even ask a question, and I don't know how to turn this into a comment. Neighborhoods versus cluster living. And I'd like to know where that is going and what it's about. Because if there's going to be a discussion on the development of the Peladrone project, I'd like to just know, well, how this is going to impact our neighborhoods. When I know the people that are moving in here from at least from the Four Corners states, and Texas is a Four Corners state, but there's a lot of people moving in, and they are coming from neighborhoods or homes. And if we're developing huge complexes to meet those needs, housing needs, what's going to happen when they find houses that are affordable? Thank you, Mr. Martinez, because he approached me about traffic that's impacting our neighborhood now that on El Paraíso, now that it's repaved. But 2 extra speed bumps don't seem to matter. And I'm up early, so I get to see over 5-ton trucks, like landscaping trucks with huge trailers. Who wants to go down a winding road if they have to go through Chavez? And that's not fair to Chavez representative or resident people as well. So where are we going? You know, what is this about?
Thank you. Next, Tom Donlin. If you can give your name and address, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Donlin, and I reside at 6668 Edgewood Drive Northwest. And I mostly want to speak to something I wish I didn't have to speak to. I wish we didn't have a ruling that said that expressing your opinion in a campaign or in public meant that you were unqualified to be able to make decisions or participate in decisions. But that is the ruling we have, and that is how things are going. And consequently, I think that you, Chairwoman Homan, and Commissioner Barrow should recuse yourself from tonight's palindrome discussions for the expression that you've already had of saying what you thought should happen with palindrome. And it disappoints me because I don't think that's the way the rules should be, but apparently that's the way they are. The other piece that I really want to say is both somewhat on the subject, but it's in terms of how to approach it, because it's been very confusing for me, as I'm sure it is for you. What do you do when you're approving a project that's already built? That didn't have the proper approvals. The people involved didn't take the time to, or take into consideration when that was charged with, do we go forward with this when people have legitimately brought up, and as you as the Planning Commission did earlier, say that you thought that this shouldn't, the appeal should be upheld, and that we shouldn't be considering things. That the developer chose to go ahead even though they knew this was a question that needed to be answered before, and that they were at risk for having things built and finding out later, oops, we couldn't do that. So I would say, given that as you consider how to go forward, that you don't consider what has been built, because that was their decision to take a risk and think about, and they figured that they were going to be right and they would win, and in the end they would. So I think we should have an open hearing tonight that actually considers, like you would have done 2 years ago before they started construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Randy McKee. Okay. Next will be Loretta Chavez Smith.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Loretta Chavez Smith. I live at 536 Chavez Road Northwest, here in the village of Los Ranchos. We've been getting so much stuff. Let's get Mary home, recuse yourself. Connie, Who's going to be next? I mean, we just keep fighting with them amongst ourselves. We just need to put all that stuff aside and start moving forward. It just, every single month, we keep going backwards and we come back to the same stuff over and over again. When are we going to move forward, people?
Thank you. Now, I'm not sure I can read this. Henry Snowden? Please correct me when you're at the stand.
Good evening. My name is Henry Schoner. That's S-H-O-N-E-R-D. I probably didn't spell it that well. I thought this was to be a Board of Trustee meeting, but it's not. And I thought I might still have something to say. It's about school, agriculture, and community policing. I work as sort of like an educational assistant at the Los Ranchos Elementary School. It's a community school, which is really a great thing. I do teach during Genius Hour, which is one of the things that they do at community schools. I'm very happy to do it. I'm also involved in agriculture in the village at Grandpa's Community Farm. We're a farm that raises food for the needy. And it's dedicated, Bob Martinez, right there on the right, is the person that got it started. And it's to honor his grandfather, not us, though we're just as old as his grandfather was. And then community policing. We do have a new sheriff in town. His name is John Allen. And I think he's I think he's a great leader. And we're going to have a new captain at the North Valley, the center. You know, what is that called? The North Valley substation. Exactly. Captain Kimbrough is stepping down, and we don't know who's going to be there, but. We should be interested. We actually do pretty well in the village as far as crime is concerned. And I think that the Sheriff's Department is in large part responsible for that. So that's what's happening at my neck of the woods, just in case you think I'm totally protected from what's going on. Otherwise, I live at Edgewood and Osuna, between 2nd and 4th Street. Imagine that. Please imagine that. I'm not happy about everything that's happened, but I agree with Loretta. We need to go forward, and I would say looking at some of the things that we do well in education, agriculture, and community policing might help us to go forward thinking about things that really we are doing well at. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Henry. Marcia Adams.
Good evening, Marcia Adams, 1008 Acequia Trail. And I'm here speaking for the Friends of Los Ranchos about the sign that some of you may or may not have seen on Rio Grande this past week. It was a very offensive, foul language sign. And I had several inquiries asking if Friends was behind that sign, and most definitely we were not. Our goal is to promote the rural character and agricultural nature of the village, so I just wanted to make that clear to people. Thank you.
Excuse me. Gordine McKenzie.
Gordine McKenzie, 7315 Guadalupe Trail, Northwest. Commissioners, I just wanted to say, And I know you will do your due diligence as we begin to hear things that are going to be difficult, and we may all have different opinions about them. But in terms of upholding our state statutes and our village ordinances, I just keep looking at them and thinking, you know, let those be our guiding stars as we move forward into an area that is very difficult because things have already been done. And so how can we do this the very best way and make sure that we cover all of the bases? Like some of my neighbors, of course, we believe in reaching across the aisles and creating peace and working together as a village. Thank you.
Nancy Nangaroni? I'm sure I butchered it. So. Nangaroni.
But that's totally cool. So Nancy Nangaroni, 7315 Guadalupe Trail. Let's see, obviously I'm a member of Friends, as you all know. We had submitted a letter prior to this meeting discussing what's going on, and then we resubmitted a modified version of that letter where we removed our opposition to this process of approvals post-construction. We did that because we are trying to settle the lawsuits. We're trying to put this behind us. We are, I don't like being at odds with anybody in the village. I know there are some people that think they're at war with me. At least one person has said that to me. But that's not what I'm about. That's not what Friends is about. So we're trying to get this all settled. And I agree with you, Loretta. Where's Loretta? There you are. Love you, Loretta. That said, I still want to respectfully ask you, Mary and Connie, to consider recusing yourself from the Palindrome processes. Mary, I know you stood up and did the right thing some time ago when you voted to deny the approval. That was part of the whole then court proceedings from then on. And your signatures on the informed Los Ranchos letter, a group that has really worked in opposition to Friends and to what we're trying to do, to me establishes a position with respect to these proceedings. And I would ask you to consider, for the sake of appearances and for the sake of healing the community, consider recusing yourself from the Palindrome considerations. So thank you for listening. I appreciate the work you all do. I know you're not compensated fairly for what you all do. And so thank you so much.
Great. All right, no, there's no compensation. All right. Darnell, do we have any members of the public signed up to speak online?
No, correct, none.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak that didn't have the opportunity to sign up? If you will give your name and address.
Good evening, Jeff Phillips, 605 Schulte Road, Northwest. Chair, Commissioners, Director Hill, we live in an amazing place with amazing people. Thank you all for your service. I've been active in the village for 17 years in a few different capacities, including a 5-year stint where you guys sit. I'm here tonight to recognize and commend civic engagement, By my own reckoning, we're at a high point in community involvement and direct civic engagement, and that's a good thing. I want to be part of continuing that. So you may have heard we've taken a couple of walks recently, one at Del Norte Open Space and one on National Good Neighbor Day. These were wonderful events, truly heartened. Now I'd like to tell everyone about 3 more walks we have planned and encourage anyone who has an idea for a walk or is interested in leading one to get in contact. We do have an email address, walklosranchos@gmail.com. The first walk is Thursday, October 24th at 8:30 a.m. We're going to walk Chavez Road from the villa to the end and back. The second walk is Chamisal Lateral, and we are going to do that in 3 parts, but the second walk is November 9th at 3 p.m. That's a Saturday, and we're going to start at Pueblo Solano and 4th and walk south on Chamisal Lateral to Willow and either return on the lateral or return via 4th Street. And the third is what we're calling Walk Off the Stuffing. That's the day after Thanksgiving. And we're going to meet at Taft Middle School on the track in the field there. Some walking, some sitting and drinking coffee, fly a kite, throw a frisbee, throw a ball, visit, get to know one another. It's not just the walks. There are many ways to get involved in this community. One you may have also heard about is the community yard sale. There's flyers all over. Community yard sale is going to be at the barn on Sunday, November 17th from 9 until noon. Residents can take a slot, a table, for $20, and the $20 is delivered through the Eventbrite registration system. The $20 for anybody who does take a slot goes directly to the Community Garden Fund. It's a good way to, again, do something as a community, and hopefully you'll either come out and sell your lightly used wares or come and buy something, but know that's happening on Sunday, November 17th. There, of course, are plenty of other things with the Agri-Nature Center and the Ag Program and the Main Street Initiative and Route 66 celebration and Hopeful Neighborhoods. And
the speaker's time has expired.
We heard a little bit earlier about the some of the other programs. So get involved, enjoy, make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. As there's only one item on the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes for September 10th Planning and Zoning meeting, I would ask my fellow commissioners to take a look at those minutes, and I ask you, are there any corrections or comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Edward?
I have a comment. One of the things that came up in the discussion of the approval of that Airbnb license was that the casita appeared to have been non-permitted construction, and it was not on the tax rolls. And the square footage measurements were significantly different. And to the degree that we're going to hold one group of people to one set of standards, we need to hold everybody to the same set of standards. And there was discussion there, and I think it's a concern of mine that the village is granting permits for people to stay at a cost and at a price without it possibly being permitted construction. Somebody's going to die, and they're going to get hurt. And I think that that needs to be mentioned in these minutes. They were not mentioned in the minutes, and I think it needs to be reinserted in there.
Commissioner Edward, do you have suggested language and where to put it?
Just what I said. Sorry to be so flip. There was, I'd have to go through the minutes exactly, but it was in the discussion relating to the elements I think they quote me in here in one of the comments I said about the square footage. But that was just, it was too brief of a description of really what was said in the discussion. I think it's, here it says, commissioners presented questions for Director Hill. Commissioner Edward, there appears to be a discrepancy of the square footage in the main house and the casita, and then that's where that should have been added in there, because there was more discussion. I mean, it bothers me. I mean, we're looking at the hurricane coming in, and these homes are gonna get blown over in a second, and they were all permitted possibly and of sound construction, but whenever we're handing down and giving permits to people for property that isn't being taxed, and if it's not being taxed, it wasn't permitted, and the lady didn't even know, she even said that it was substandard construction for part of the building. And that needs to be in there.
Mr. Hill, can we have staff add a sentence or two, or do you have suggested language that you would like to
Yes,
capture?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, there are two items. One, it applies to many properties in the village that are annexed into the village that were once in the county. And so the ages of those structures sometimes is hard to calculate, not meaning that they weren't built under some permit at some point. But the point is fair taken that we can include Bernalillo County assessor information in these cases from now on, and include printouts of these records as exhibits for our reports.
All right, but in regard to
I
the
think
language for the minutes.
I think it needs to be discussed in here, and the point that I was making at the time is that we need to revisit that policy and make sure that it is permitted construction and it is being taxed and assessed, because I see people in here who have businesses, and your properties are being assessed, and it's not equitable to our community, it's not equitable to the kids that go to these schools, for us to be granting a commercial permit to conduct business on property that's not getting taxed and doesn't have a permit.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, point well taken. And as I mentioned, with regard to Bernalillo County assessor data, the data will show building permit history from when it was in Bernalillo County, and whatever tax information that's appropriate for us to include. We may have to have a discussion about that here and that disclosure, but it is a fair point. We can include that information in our report packets.
Commissioner Edward, would it help if on line 16 there, where currently it says, Commissioner Edward, and it says there appears to be a discrepancy in the square footage of the main house and casita, is that where you would put a question?
I can definitively, I mean, I didn't go back and watch but there was several times where this was brought up from the different commissioners here. I just want to make sure that it's noted that there was a discussion that the property owner said that she felt it was of poor construction, and that it was clearly not on the assessor's records that were provided to us as a part of the package, and that we should have that as a part of the requirements in the future.
Would it help, would it cure your problem if we put something that says in the future, permitting and assessor information should be provided in the packets? Something like that?
Yes.
There was at least 10 or 15 minutes worth of discussion about it. I think that for 15 minutes of a meeting that lasted about an hour and a half, it warrants commentary to be recorded.
Well, these, if I may just make a statement, these are basically the notes of the meeting. They're not.
And it fails to acknowledge those notes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I will go through the testimony and derive as much of the language actually stated as I can, but it will include references to county data, county assessor, building permit data, and property tax. So those words will be in there, combined with actual statements you made on this subject.
Yeah. In light of the discussion we're about ready to have, to treat other people to a very high standard and treat other people to not a very high standard. I just don't think it's equitable, and we need to be fair across the board.
Agreed.
Commissioner?
I appreciate you raising the issue. I have no concerns, and I think it is an accurate reflection to say that we discussed the importance of that information being a part of the process, and that is a policy issue that should be taken up, but that the applicant had applied the existing village code and processes and everything that the village had required of her in this application, and that we shouldn't change the rules in the middle of that process. So I'm not comfortable saying definitively that her casita is or isn't permitted. Her comments about the prior condition was why she hired someone to improve it and make improvements. So without getting into minutia, I think it is important to reflect your concern, and an appropriate concern, around what we include in a policy that does involve people and the places they live in.
And that was part of the discussion, but it wasn't my intent to change the rules mid-stroke. It was that the rules should include those items, because if somebody gets hurt in that unit and work was committed that was not permitted, gas, electrical, plumbing, roofing, structural, it's on us.
Commissioner Martinez?
I think we're going to find ourselves in a predicament that we're going to have to realize that what you are bringing up is exactly right. But what we have to do is take a little step backwards, because what happens is this lady purchased the property. The lady did not know anything in the purchasing of the property. So all these people that are coming in and purchasing property to remodel, we have to recognize that they're going to take the brunt of somebody that did something 30 years ago. And I think that needs to be brought into what Mr. Hill is going to have to be looking at, because at no fault is a brand new owner going to take responsibility for somebody doing something 30 years ago. And I think where you're going is the right direction, but I think we need to kind of tweak it to a point that we have to realize other potentials, such as a new buyer that this lady bought this recent. And so I think that's my only comment on that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, what I would propose is, since this is, the wording is important, and I would advise to allow staff time to work this statement out rather than considering making a decision on these meetings tonight, on the minutes tonight.
I just would like to have it included. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it was discussed at length.
Is there a motion to defer this approval?
I make a motion to defer the adoption and approval of the minutes until the next P&Z meeting.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Commissioner Barrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez?
Yes.
Commissioner Edward?
Yes.
Commissioner Baldwin?
Yes.
Commissioner Haywood?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagliapietra?
Yes.
Commissioner Homan, yes. Motion carries, and we will see this again next month with, I assume, today's meeting minutes as well. So now we go on to the public hearings and applications. Will all those who will be speaking before the commission tonight please stand to be sworn in? This is for all public hearings and applications on the agenda tonight. If you will be speaking on any of the public hearings and applications, please stand.
If you would, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of law? Okay.
Okay, before we get started on this, because there has been questions on the appropriateness of both myself and Commissioner Barrow from presiding, Mr. Hill, will you please explain what the process is tonight and what we're trying to accomplish?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. Let me explain some of what sketch review is. Sketch review is looking at a project at its most basic concept level. It simply asks questions about why the project is being designed the way that it is. And our regulations require community input and comment on those concepts. So that is what this meeting is about. We are not going to have a technical review of regulations. That will come later. But tonight, this is a meeting for comment as the applicant presents the most basic premise of why it is they're doing what they're doing. So as a process, there is no decision on the part of the Planning Commission to make. There will be no motion, no second, no ruling. So participation in this by the full commission has not come up as a concern, and no determination has been made. The concern has been, excuse me, will you turn that off, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I know how it is. I know how it is. So anyway, commissioners and member of the public, what we're looking at is what are the basics of this project? Why, when you see something on the screen, why does it look that way? What's behind it? That's what this meeting is for. And as I mentioned, there will be no decision and no issue of who does and who does not participate on the commission. The commission's task is to facilitate this meeting for your comment. And the commission may have comments of their own, but that is what's happening at this meeting tonight. Madam Chair.
Mr. Chappell, is there anything you would like to add as far as this is Open Meetings Act violation and we're trying to cure what had been seen as a violation, and this is just an initial step, correct?
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, I think Mr. Hill was correct. There's no, what happens here tonight under the ordinances is that you as the commission or welcome every one of you to give your recommendations to the planning director. And that's what this is about. The planning director then takes those recommendations back with their own evaluation of this. And then in the next step will be come back to the commission with what is presumed will be, or at least has a chance to be, an acceptable preliminary plat. And at the preliminary plat stage, then that's when the commission will vote and make a decision. This is just to give your input. This is like a meeting to give your input to the planning director on what you see about it, if there needs to be changes, what you don't like, what you do like, and then it comes back in the form of a preliminary plat for vote at a later time.
Thank you. So with that going forward, I hope you all understand that we are simply the mechanism to hear your responses today. There is no decision that we will be making, no vote taken. And with that said, I personally don't feel that I need to recuse, and I can't speak for Commissioner Barrow, but.
I agree.
All right. So we will continue. So we're on to SS 2401, a request by Jim Strozer, agent for Palindrome Communities LLC, for a sketch plat review for proposed tracks 1 through 6, trailhead at Chamisal subdivision. The subject property is located at 310, 330, and 350 Osuna Road Northwest, and is legally described as lots 1 through 12 and lot 14 as described in Exhibit A, lands of the purchase, sale, and development agreement between the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Palindrome LLC, a Nevada limited liability company, signed October 2020. The legal descriptions are further detailed in Trailhead at Chamisal, listing of property, legal descriptions, and owners. The subject site contains approximately 12 acres. With all that's been said, are there any commissioners who are going to recuse themselves from this issue? No? Director Hill, can you provide us with that planning report?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Commissioners, good evening. As mentioned, this is a sketch review for a land subdivision concept for the subject site. Weston Glass from Palindrome will give a presentation on what the underlying premise of this is. Otherwise, this meeting for sketch review for concept and comments is established under Village Code Section 917, Procedures and Submission Requirements for Plats, subsection C, Major Subdivisions, subsection 2, Sketch Plat Approval. We have had our pre-application meetings with the applicant in preparation for this meeting.
Great. The speaker, if you will approach the podium and provide your name and address for the record.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Weston Glass, 412 Northwest 5th Avenue, Portland, Oregon. Our agent, Jim Strozier, is participating remotely this evening, so if we can bring him in, he's going to also participate in this presentation.
Stand by.
All right. Can you all hear me?
Jim, we can hear you.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Madam Chair and Commissioners, this is Jim Strozier, Principal with Consensus Planning, and I'm here remotely, unfortunately. I apologize for that, but I'm out of town today. I appreciate you all taking the time and members of the public also taking the time to attend today to provide comments and discussion related to this with this sketch plat. And I just wanted to basically set the stage. I mean, I know Weston is there at the podium, but set the stage for this conversation. The plat that's before you is to replat this property from 13 lots into 6. And the reason that's important is because the 6 lots correspond to the 6 different phases of the project. And so it also is the vehicle by which the utility easements are created, which are needed to support the project and ensure access, and all those utilities, water, sewer, electricity, and gas are all made available to the subject properties and done so in a way that facilitates the development of each of the phases moving forward. And so with that, I thank you very much, everyone, for their time this evening.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I stand for questions. Unless you'd like me to go through the pages of the plat, we can do that.
Are there any items that are of specific interest that you would like to point out?
Well, I can go through the pages. I'll be Vanna White for a second.
Mr. Glass, when you discuss a page, will you please identify the page number that you are discussing?
Certainly. So I'm displaying sheet 4 of 11. This is the sheet that shows the previous 14 parcels. And as you can see on this page, the 6 new parcels are overlaid in solid lines. The 14 previous parcels are shown in dashed lines. This page pretty much illustrates the purpose of the plat. There are a number of other pages that illustrate utility easements and describe in detail the meets and bounds of each of the property lines I don't know that it's necessary to go through every one of those, but I'm happy to do so if anyone would like me to.
Commissioners, are there any specific questions that you would like to ask or anything that you would like him to point out?
I have a question, please. So in the middle, to the right of track 6, and there's a whole mess of writing in there, boundary line, per boundary, survey plat, and all this stuff in there. Which track does that go to? It's that big, long section that's beside tracks, where the words track 6 are?
So to the right of track 6 or to the east is tract 4, and it is a large tract with odd shape.
So it goes further north than, it goes all the way up to here?
That big paragraph of text you're referring to is hiding the horizontal or the east-west property line that divides parcel 2 from parcel 4, or I suppose tract 2 from tract 4.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baldwin?
So there were originally 13 lots. They've been laid out in 6 tracts. What was the rationale? Like, why didn't you just do one big lot and have, pad sites or things that like why go through the complexity of 6 different tracts?
Commissioner, that's an excellent question. That is due to the nature of the development agreement between Palindrome and the village, which states that there are 6 phases to the proposed village center development, and each phase is its own separate approval process in terms of building permits and financing. And the development agreement states that each of those parcels is transferred when certain thresholds are met, including the issuance of building permits, the closing of financing. There may be a couple of others that I don't remember, but it was necessary to separate each one of those into separate legal lot.
That's helpful, thank you. I'm just curious about why 6? Like, why not 4? Why not 8? Like, what was the magic about 6? Was that part of the eventual concept of what would go in, and that boiled into 6 concepts? Or?
Commissioner, yes, that's exactly right. And we'll see that later on when we look at the site development plan. The development itself has 6 distinct phases. The tracts 1, 2, and 3 are the trailhead at Chamizal Apartments, which are the ones, as we all know, currently under construction. Tract 4 is intended to be a hotel. Tract 5 is intended to be more housing. Tract 6, a grocery store and retail.
Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez, I believe you had a question.
What I want to do to my fellow commissioners, because I think one of the things that we have to recognize is part of my career has been in what we're doing here. And the thing that we need to understand is accepting a lot, because what they do is the surveyors, the engineers, sewer and garbage, the water, et cetera, the engineering that they have to do are rigorous, and they have to go through a lot to create this. So one of the things I want to comfort ourselves into is realizing that the amount of work that went to get these papers together comes from different engineering companies, different surveyors, different et cetera, and the liability comes from them on that. So one of the things that we kind of can be comforting in is that their job was done prior to coming over here. So I think we need to, unless we go through way deep things, that we feel comfortable on what they did on water, sewer, surveying, easements, et cetera, et cetera. And that was just a comment to get us comfortable in realizing that the engineering and the surveying that went behind this is high quality.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay. Commissioner Edward?
I'm here. I'm standing for questions, Commissioner.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on, sorry.
All right.
I have a few questions. I don't know, it's within the packet that I received as a commissioner, so I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions about it. Sometimes in the development process, because of the economics of the world, things don't play out, things don't get built, things are vacant for maybe 5 years, maybe longer. And in looking at page number, it's the 4th and Osuna Master Plan dated March 2nd, 2022. Repeatedly throughout this document, it refer to an alternative landscape plan and parking plan, et cetera. And I'll let you get to that.
That's the next.
Mr. Glass, please take down the site plan that's not up for discussion.
This isn't it.
Thank you.
My apologies, Mr. Hill. I was just displaying what the commissioner was referring to.
Sure. That's the next topic.
I'm sorry, my mistake. I do have a question about lot number 4. Can you explain the intricacy of the irregular shaped peninsula to the east of track 4?
I certainly can. As I said, that parcel is intended to be a hotel, which in the very conceptual plans, the ground floor of that hotel would have a food hall with a number of local food vendors, a pizza, a wood-fired pizza joint, some economic development space, as well as a demonstration farm. And our understanding is that one of these previous tracts had water rights and that those can be transferred to tract 4. So part of the conceptual design for the hotel is to use those water rights to water that demonstration farm using traditional irrigation techniques and providing a legal connection directly to the Chanizal lateral, as well as a connection for pedestrians, guests of the hotel, and the various retail uses in the hotel to access the network of trails along the acequias.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right. Now, I know there are three people that have signed up from the public to ask questions regarding this or make statements. Jeff Phillips, I believe you're the first up. Once again, anybody coming to the podium, please provide your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Jeff Phillips, 605 Schulte Road, Northwest. Very briefly, I'm in support of the plat, creating the 6 tracks. I support the plat being approved, and specifically because I support the next phases, having an opportunity to place forward their site plans and continue with the commercial aspect of this entire project, which I've supported for a very long time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else supporting this review? No? Okay, we'll go on. Tom Donlin.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Sir?
Citizens may support or not support. We would also seek their comments on the ideas themselves in addition.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Donlin. I reside at 6668 Edgewood Drive Northwest. Couple things that come to mind in terms of the plat is I'm wondering if the lots that are laid out are designed to contain everything that needs to contain there on those plats, such as are they big enough to allow for all the parking that's needed for each one of those lots. You know, I'm excited about having a development at 4th and Osuna. I've been looking forward to it. The one thing that concerns me is that it's changed from the commercial development that we've been sold that this was going to be for the last 20 years, maybe 30 years, to now it's looking as if it's being residential, and that concerns me, especially when that was not what was in the RFP for this development, and that is not in the Metropolitan Development Plan. What was in there was for a small amount of residential. Fact is that I think the words are that I'm still remembering from having a small parcel up against the Chamisal to fulfill the requirement of having housing and multi-use for the application. What's being proposed here is not a small parcel for housing. It's for 2/3 of the project to be housing and 1/3 to be commercial. That means that we're not going to get nearly the gross receipts tax that we were going to get out of it. A lot of the public space that was intended for this seemed to have gotten lost. The other concern I have is that 4th and Osuna has been a problem intersection for a long time. And it's known that we need to rebuild that, we need to rework that intersection. At this point, we, as the village, own the land or will be a partial owner of all this land, and we're not taking any right-of-way to be able to reconstruct that intersection or to deal with how we want Osuna Road to work as our main entry to this village. Osuna Road is at best a 3-lane highway, a 3-lane road. There is no right-of-way beyond that. We, as the village, now own, from the Chamisal to 4th Street is now our land. And I see nothing being done to take that into consideration, to take into consideration what are the needs and what are the ones that are going to come from that traffic. We want to make this
The
an
speaker's
inviting.
time has expired.
We want to make this an inviting way to come in, and I think what I'm seeing is nothing has been taken into consideration to answer those questions. So in that sense, I think that this plat doesn't fit the needs of the village.
Thank you, Tom. Camille Varro?
I'm just having a hard time walking these days. Thank you. Camille Vados, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico. I'm not a draft person. When I talked with Mr. Hill, our new director of planning and zoning, he mentioned that this is going to be discussion on concepts. So I prepared to talk or to ask questions about what is a concept of this, because unless we understand, is this housing, is this rental, is this business, is it all of the above? And this is just 12.5 acres. And there's many different phases that I did, I'm having a printing problem, and that's not the village problem, it's my problem. So I couldn't pull up any package to talk about or to see. I just want to know how many units is available and is that complete? Is it phase 3, 1 through 3? Is this, because my understanding, Deborah O'Malley, our former county commissioner, provided $30 million for the development of low-income housing. So is that considered conceptual? Is that for all of our understanding of what is going to take place there? Is there going to be enough senior opportunities for living there? And if it's a mini hotel, is there going to be enough spaces for parking? Is that conceptual? Parking? I don't know.
Thank you, Camille. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Madam Chair, may I just give a word of explanation, because I'm sure this is kind of confusing in terms that you have a plat which is signed off and has recording information on it, and you're looking at that and saying this is a sketch plat.
Please continue, Mr. Chapel.
And so here's what where we are. You know, there was a development agreement, and on May 2nd, the court held that the approval process under the development agreement was improper, and therefore all of the approvals were invalid. And of course, that decision was made by Judge Barella Shepard. So these plats that you see are invalid plats. Judge Elaine Lujan, in a separate case which was filed by Palindrome, ordered Palindrome to come back and bring this whole process to the village again. And so Palindrome is doing that. Under the ordinance, for a sketch plan or a sketch plat, there is no specific requirement as to what's on it. And in fact, the ordinance says you can take a survey and hand draw in the lines, and that's all that you need for a sketch plat. All right. So Palindrome in this case decided to use for a sketch plat what was thought to be a recorded plat that is held to be invalid. And so that's the reason it's got so much detail and that kind of thing. When you come back for the preliminary plat, you will have a clean plat that shows exactly what is being included in the preliminary plat. So the reason I throw that out is when you, as a commissioner, start making recommendations, and they're not votes, they're only recommendations as to what you would like to see, the fact that it shows on this plat does not mean that's the way it needs to come back on a preliminary plat. And you may think it's fine the way it is, you may have a different idea, but on the preliminary plat, it will come back as a preliminary plat that is clean and it's new and it's not approved in this context. So it's not like you don't have anything to say about what shows on this paper. This is no more than could be represented on a survey with hand-drawn pencil lines as to where the lots should be. And I just want to know why you're going through this. It is odd, I've never seen it before, but that's where the courts have put us.
Thank you.
I have a question then.
Excuse me?
I have a question then.
Okay. Can we hold off for just a moment? We are still taking public comment. Darnell, is there anyone online wanting to give a public comment on this? No. Okay. Will the applicant go back up to the podium?
I have just one question.
Hold on. Commissioner Haywood, would you like, what is your comment?
It's a question, I don't really know who to address it to, but probably to the attorney. One of my recommendations would have been, if the construction was not up, to address particularly traffic issues, that an easement would be shown along the north side of the entire property to widen Osuna. That is now physically impossible. So that would have been my recommendation if we were at square one. So how do I address that in light of the fact that now that is a moot point?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Haywood, I think that we understand the limitations of maybe what can be done in a practical way, but I think your recommendation should be the same as if it was a vacant piece of ground.
Okay.
Now, whether it can be followed through and done and improved that way, but that's what this is for.
Right.
There was no Open Meetings Act proceeding which allowed those kind of comments to be made because of the approval process in the development agreement. And that's the reason the court said that it was invalid. Okay, one of the reasons. So you should make the same recommendations, the same comments that you would as though it was a vacant piece of ground.
Well then,
Would the applicant like to address any of the comments that were made to clarify anything that came up?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I will do my best. I think a lot of the comments would have been more appropriately made in the next phase of what we're
Okay.
looking at tonight, because
So
they
we'll look
mostly
at
dealt with issues that would be addressed by the site development plans.
Okay.
To the extent that Commissioner Haywood, your comment about the easement to widen Osuna, you are right that it's impossible to do that, but not because there are already buildings built there, because the development agreement that was signed prior to all of this, and in fact, the RFP that the village issued that led to eventually the signing of that development agreement promised these lots as they are to be provided for this development, so.
Okay. All right, so let's continue with the commissioner's comments. Commissioner Drew, I believe you wanting to say something?
I have some questions about parking places. We know there's not adequate parking for 1, 2, and 3. I would like to make sure that there is adequate parking for 1, 2, and 3. I think land needs to be taken from 6 and 4 for 1, 2, and 3. I don't think that we'll have people going to the businesses that are going to be underneath if they have to park a mile away and walk. People just don't do that. So I think that needs to be rectified before 6, 4, and 5 are built on. Thank you.
Commissioner Edward, did you have something?
I have a question just because I was trying to follow this. Excuse my ignorance, so please educate me. I'm unclear as to what is parcel along what I believe to be 4th Street. It refers to parcel 7.2, 4.7, 4.6. Is that not the right-of-way for 4th Street? And is, I guess, what do those parcels refer to? Do those extend further across to the 4th Street? And why are they referenced on there even at all?
Commissioner, that's an excellent question, and I have the answer. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about widening the right-of-way in Osuna, and that, in fact, did happen once in the past. And during the process of surveying in preparation for drawing this plat, our surveyors discovered that those, they're called takings, had not been properly documented. So those little slices of land belonged to the village, but they're drawn that way because they were sliced off of those adjacent parcels previously. And I'm not exactly sure the right terminology, but this plat basically fixed the problems that were caused by that process not having been done exactly right in the past. But those little slices of land were taken at one point from the owners of those previous parcels to widen the right-of-way on 4th Street.
Okay, and to that extent, just for my education here, the property boundary line, what would that physically be? I mean, as drawn on here, what would that physically be if I was to walk out there today? Is that the edge of the curb, or does that go to the middle of the road?
It is the back of the sidewalk.
Back of the sidewalk, okay.
Anything else, Commissioner Edward?
I guess I'm a little confused as to when I can say things and when I can't say things and refer to certain documents in the materials that we have tonight. So I'll just put my foot in my mouth. I guess the thing that is concerning to me is the easements, the widening, which would, it seems to be obvious that there needs to probably at some point be an avenue by which to widen these streets. What you said about the parking, I think when it comes to a development, each tract should stand alone, as if it's a tract, you would sell it, and if somebody was to individually develop it, then that site needs to be able to meet the guidelines of the community for which those guidelines were set or established by. And at least the way that I've looked at this, while it is a master plan, master plans get amended all the time, that each one of these tracts should stand on their own merits. And to the extent that this has been developed, these tracts do not stand on their own merits.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, first of all, Commissioner Talia Pietra, sorry if I butchered your name. Didn't mean to ignore your question earlier, and it relates to what Commissioner Edwards said. The discussion of parking requirements, I think, would be more appropriate in the next item on the agenda, but if the Commission would like, I'd be happy to answer those questions now.
Yeah, let's hold that off till the next item where it's appropriate.
Okay.
Hold on, please. Let me, Director Hill,
Yeah.
would you explain the difference between a tract and a lot? Is there a difference in legal? Anything legally? I mean,
Madam Chair, Commissioners, the word tract has been used throughout surveying history. The word tract sometimes is more associated with properties that abut Conservancy District land. But I think as far as this package, the applicant has chosen this to describe a series of phases of development in relation to the lots. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, Mr. Hill, you're correct.
Yeah. So there isn't any reason why the word lot cannot be used, but I've seen the word tract associated more often with multiple phases of development.
Thank you. Let's continue with the Commissioner's discussion. Commissioner Baldwin, did you have something?
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to stay focused on this chart, and I'm not clear if my eyes are seeing something that's there or not seeing something that's there that I'm sort of transmitting from another page. So I just want to understand that the concept is that there is one entrance to this set of tracks on 4th and one entrance off Asuna. Is that the concept?
Commissioner, yes, that's correct.
Are there any other external ingresses or egresses for this collection of tracks?
Actually, Commissioner, there are 2 entrances for vehicles on 4th Street and 1 on Osuna.
Thank you, that clears it up.
Commissioner Martinez.
I agree with you that we need to talk about parking, et cetera, on the next phase. On this one, what I really like to do is, and I did not know it, because one of the things that I think is critical is when you brought up the water rights, one of the things that I'd like to do is get a little bit of a discussion in that, because I do not know how much we had or the village had, because the problem that I am seeing is that the Agri-Nature Center was on leases for their water. Their leases got taken away, So Agri-Nature Center at this point in time does not have the ability to water. My question, and I don't know if you can answer that, is how much water rights were here and could have, because the village owned it, be transferred over to the Agri-Nature Center to help their water situation? You don't have that? Okay. I think, I don't know the amount of water. Do you have any ability to understand the amount of water rights that this particular parcel had?
Commissioner, it's been about 2.5 years. I would have to go back and check the records.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Martinez, from my vague recollection, when these properties were acquired, these are MRGC surface rights, and MRGC surface rights cannot be transferred to another location. They stay with the land in which they were adjudicated.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to get some resolution because of our lack of water at the Agri-Nature Center, hoping that there might be a
Solution? Thank you, Mr. Chappell.
Good try.
Mr. Donlin, sorry. You had a question, but I'll need you up at the microphone, please. You've got to go to the microphone. And once again, your name and address.
Tom Donellan, at 6668 Edgewood Drive Northwest. Thank you, commissioners, for letting me to come back to the podium and ask a question. It's a conceptual piece of, if you're looking at lots and saying these lots make sense, and these lots are being designed to fit a site plan, it seems like you're putting the cart before the horse. Because if you say, okay, here are the lots, then do they actually fit with what's going to go into it? You can't be making that decision when you're deciding how the lots are being laid out. So it seems that while normally a plat would be done before the site plan is done, what's being proposed here is a lot plot or plat that fits a particular site plan. So I really question the notion that we can't discuss the site plan when the lots are being set out for that site plan.
Mr. Hill.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, and sir, I appreciate your comments. I think that once the commission finds completion with the comments for this case, when we move to the next case, I think there will be a little more flexibility to address the things that you're commenting on.
And I guess the piece would be to say, is it possible to, in this process, come revisit the plat and replat it in a different way? If what the future says, oh, we need to do this differently, or there would be, are we stuck with the lot plan given? And yeah, that seems like it gives the applicant much more control and takes it away from the village and the residents, because then they'll say, well, the lot plan doesn't allow that to happen, so therefore we can't make that accommodation. And it would seem like there should be a way to be able to not be stuck, given that we can't talk about the site plan, which I understand. And I tried to address my issues in ways that did it. That's why I said I really spoke about, is the intent for each lot to contain everything on that lot that's going to be developed on that lot? I mean, that is with hindsight, because I know that it wasn't designed that way. I'll be quite frank about saying that, but that I was trying to bring up the concept and to ask that and to have it be a question that the developer would answer as to whether that is their intent, or no, they really did intend to share parking. And so that, how they designed that was, and that could be a part of designing the plat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I would advise questions regarding whether the discussion of this item has been completed.
Yes. So are there any other recommendations from the commission, or have we completed the review for the sketch plan at this point?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, just to clarify, throughout this process, there will never be a moment where we cannot discuss a design element. So if this conversation concludes tonight and the applicant prepares a preliminary package, we're still talking about design.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question.
A question or a recommendation?
A question based on my former recommendation. Attorney Chappell, if you wouldn't mind addressing it. The development agreement that was signed between the village and Palindrome ostensibly eliminates my recommendation about an easement along Osuna. But we are discussing this as if there was no development at all. Does that development agreement still stand in light of a sketch plat review? And I still cannot make that recommendation?
Madam Chairman and Commissioner Haywood, the court set aside only the approval process so that nothing was approved under that process. The other parts of the development agreement are still in place, and that affects what is happening here tonight. The sketch plat shows 6 lots. The site plan that's be considered on a preliminary basis only shows 3 lots in 3 phases. And the reason for that difference is there's been no approvals or anything of the site plan. But the development agreement itself says that the total property will be platted before there's any conveyance to the developer, and that happened when the 3 lots were conveyed. So we have to consider all 6 lots, but we don't consider anything further than what's on the site plan, which is only 3 of these parcels. A little bit, and like I say, so the development agreement is still in place. There are interpretations of the development agreement, which there may be some differences of opinion on, but the process that didn't get done was that the development agreement did not provide for review by the Planning Commission and the Board of Directors. It was done by the Planning Director and the Village Administrator, and the court said that was not permissible. So that's where we are today, the reason we're here. But the plat has to be 6 lots because we're following the development agreement, because that's still in force. The site development plan, the preview, will only have 3 of these parcels on it.
So, do we have any further recommendations, or are we coming to a close on the sketch plat review? And if so, I would need a motion to close the review.
I make a motion to close the review.
Second.
Okay. This is a roll call vote. Commissioner Barrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez?
Yes.
Commissioner Edward? Commissioner Baldwin?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagliapetra?
No.
Commissioner Haywood?
Yes.
Commissioner Homan? Yes. So we're just closing the review. It's not a vote of approval. It's just the review for the sketch plat has been closed. Correct? Okay. Just want to make sure that I'm doing this, what we need to do. I'm getting a grin from Mr. Chappell, so I think.
And Madam Chair, you should put into the record the votes. I think who passed and who voted. That's supposed to be a part of the record.
Okay. So the vote did pass for the closing of the sketch plat review. Is that what you're saying?
No, the rules of the Planning and Zoning Commission is it has to go in the record, each vote, whatever
Yes.
it's on. So you voted to close the review of the sketch plat.
Yes.
And it needs to be, the record needs to show who voted for and who voted against.
Okay.
I think it was, the vote appeared to me to to pass on a 5-2 vote.
Yes.
But you need to spell that out in the record for procedural purposes.
Okay, so the closing of the sketch plat review did pass on a 5-2 vote. And it's just for the review, and we had two commissioners, Edward and Taglapetra, that voted nay, while the remaining commissioners voted in support. Okay. Let the record show that the public hearing for item SS 2401, a request by Jim Strozier, agent for Palindrome Communities LLC, for a sketch plat review for proposed tracks 1 through 6, trailhead at Chamisal subdivision, has been formally closed. Now we'll go on to the next piece, which has more detail in it, and I think we'll be able to address many of the questions that have been asked by both the public and the commissioners. So we're on to SP 2401, a request by Jim Strozier, agent for Palindrome Communities LLC, for a sketch review for a site development plan. The subject property is located at 310, 330, and 350 Osuna Road Northwest, and is legally described as lots 1 through 12 and lot 14 as described in Exhibit A, lands of the purchase, sale, and development agreement between the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Palindrome Communities LLC, a Nevada limited liability company, signed October 2020. The legal descriptions are further detailed in Trailhead at Chamisal, listing of property, legal descriptions, and owners. The subject site contains approximately 12 acres. Are there any commissioners who will recuse themselves from this item? Once again, this is a review. Seeing and hearing none, Director Hill, may you please provide the planning report for us.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, SP 2401 is a sketch review for a site development plan for this subject site as established in Village Code Article 2 Zoning and Zone Map 9225 application and approval process, Commission Board issued permits for site development plan. The same format, the applicant will present the site design concept. The process is designed to seek comments on this design concept, both from the public and from members of the Planning Commission. You will see an illustration from a previous packet that shows all 6 of the lots, proposed tracks. But for the site development plan, we are preoccupied with tracks 1, 2, and 3 as proposed because those are the tracks for which plans have been submitted, reviewed, and are currently under construction. So there may be some questions or curiosities about tracks proposed 4, 5, and 6, but this portion, as mentioned by the attorney, is more focused on proposed tracks 1, 2, and 3, as that construction is currently underway. And for the record, the village has not received any building plans for the proposed 4, 5, 6 tracks as noted in the site plan. Mr. Glass?
Before Mr. Voss speaks, do we need to have everybody sworn in again, please? They were
I
sworn
think we
in
said
previous-
anybody that was going to testify tonight should.
Tonight in general, okay.
Yeah, so I think everyone's been sworn in, unless there's somebody that was going to testify that was not sworn in. And if you are going to do that, then I will swear you in.
Thank you, thank you. The applicant?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I will present our site development plan. Mr. Hill, I see 2 tabs here. Can you tell me which one?
Darnell? Yes. Would you help him, please?
I believe they are. So what I'm showing on the screen here is page 8 of the PDF of the site development plan application. This is the master plan for the Village Center project, which is included in the site development plan application as an exhibit for reference only. This master plan was previously approved by the village before we prepared and submitted the site development plan. The approval of this master plan has not been questioned, has not been rendered null and void by a court. So this master plan for all 6 parcels and the approval thereof is what we have relied on in preparing the site development plan, as well as the plat. I think it's important that we start with this approved master plan because it has a lot of important information that informs what we did in the site development plan. Most relevant to tonight's questions from earlier regarding parking, the zoning code.
Madam Chair, point of order. Mr. Glass, please clarify what you mean by master plan.
Yes.
What is the full title of that document? Are you referring to site development plans or are you referring to metro redevelopment plans?
Neither. This is the master plan that was a step along the way of, we submitted this master plan to the village as a prerequisite to submitting our plat and site development plans.
So are you meaning the project's master plan?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, that is right. This master plan was a requirement of the development agreement, and I would have to review, but I want to say it's in the zoning code. It's a requirement of the zoning code for a project like this. I don't know for sure, but I know there was a requirement for us.
Okay.
And it is spelled out in the development agreement as well as a supplemental letter we were issued by the village that went into further detail on the procedures we were required to follow in the approvals for this project, the entire project. And that supplemental letter was made officially a part of the development agreement.
Pardon me, Mr. Glass. Madam Chair, Commissioners, just to clarify, both of these cases have a combination of 8.5 by 11 and 11 by 17. So you have to scroll past the 8.5 by 11 pages before you get to the 11 by 17 plan pages.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's page 8 of the PDF, Commissioner.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioners, we could get into a lot of legal arguments. I think for purposes of this meeting and your feedback, you should provide your comments as to what you would like to see on this plan, or what you don't like in this plan. And once you go back in the next phase, whether or not that's something that can be done because of the agreement or whatever is a separate matter that will be decided as you look at each of those kind of things. There are questions as to what was approved, what wasn't approved, what was set aside, what wasn't set aside, but those are not things you need to discuss tonight. What you need to do is give your input to what is being proposed here, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, let me reiterate, this page here is included for reference only. It's not a part of the application. It's providing information, and we included it in this application because it's important. Everything in this master plan was approved, and we used this master plan as a reference in preparing the site development plan. The following pages after this one in the PDF are the site plans, elevations, etc., that are actually the requirements of a sketch site development plan submittal. But I did want to start with this one because it does answer the questions that Commissioners Tagliapietra and Edward brought up about parking and each parcel containing its required parking within its own boundaries. This master plan proposed an alternative parking plan, which is allowed by the zoning code. And basically what we did, take all the uses proposed on all 6 parcels, calculate all the required parking for all of those uses, and then provide all of that required parking across all 6 parcels. And meeting the requirements of the parking through the alternative parking plan means that any given parcel may have slightly more or slightly less than the required number of parking spaces for the uses on that parcel. But the intention is that visitors, residents, guests on this village center project would park on wherever there's parking and walk to wherever there's the use they're there for. So that is what we proposed in the master plan. That is what we were approved to move forward with to submit our site development plans. The required uses add up to 424 parking spaces. We proposed 425 parking spaces. And I would like to mention that right now, as you all know, we're constructing the buildings on parcels 1, 2, and 3. And this tonight's site development plan is only for parcels 1, 2, and 3. However, we are constructing almost all of the parking you see on this master plan now. And when parcels 1, 2, and 3 are finished, there will be vastly more parking available than is required for the uses on those 3 parcels. It will be on the other parcels, waiting for the future development. So I'll move on to the next pages, unless there are any questions at this point.
Continue with your presentation and then we will ask.
Okay. The sketch site development plan requirements are for a site plan for each parcel. So there's one site plan included for each of the 3 parcels we're applying for this application, parcels 1, 2, and 3. Those are the following 3 pages after this one. So we have tract 1, tract 2, tract 3. Those go into a little more detail, but they follow the outline of the property lines that was proposed in the master plan and the building footprints. Naturally, as you start to develop these things, the design requires some little changes, some pushes and pulls here and there. The footprint of the building goes from a real simple rectangle into something a little more complex as the actual uses in the building get developed. So you'll see that in these 3 site plans. Following the site plans are the elevations of the buildings. There's one page for each building, illustrating the general intent of this is to illustrate height, materials, colors, etc. Following those pages is a letter from the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority. It's called a Water and Sewer Availability Letter, and it's basically a statement from them saying water and sewer services are available to this site and we will serve the site. And that's also a requirement of the sketch site development plan submittal. Those last 2 pages are illustrations provided by ABCWUA showing where the water and sewer utilities are located nearby. And that is all there is to this sketch site development plan submittal.
Great, thank you. So let's start with the public that have signed up. Then we'll go on to the commissioners. Jeff Phillips. Once again, name and address, please.
Good evening, Jeff Phillips, 605 Schulte Road, Northwest. With respect to the use, the permissive use for these three, I'm looking at in our code 9.2.14, Village Center Zone Code states that the VC zone should be the highest density residential zoning district in the village. Residential density is limited by area regulations on lot width, setbacks, and height. That's in 9.2.14D, as in David. Residential use means housing human beings. It is a permitted use in the VC zone code. It's explicitly permitted. And in order to achieve the high density goal, the code specifically prohibits duplexes, triplexes, and single-family dwellings. That was on purpose. Townhomes can be permitted conditionally, but even those have to provide a minimum of 24 dwelling units per acre. The point of the VC zone was to have mixed use, high density, and that's why I do, again, continue to support this project and specifically these site plans. I believe it does adhere, and it also accomplishes the purpose and intent expressed in the zone code 9214. The last thing is more of a question. I understand from the two planning department reports that there will be 4 meetings with respect to the plat and 2 meetings with respect to the site plan between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the BOT. And if it can be addressed tonight, would we be able to hear which will go first? Because I suspect they'll be separate as opposed to like tonight in one signal meeting. If that can be addressed, otherwise I'll read future reports. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tom Donlin.
Good evening again, Commissioners. My name is Tom Donlin, and I reside at 6668 Edgewood Drive, Northwest. I'm sorry I didn't get to review the packet in its entirety. Did it include the Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan of which this is a design to meet? Was that included in it? No. I think that's a real oversight in terms of reviewing what is being proposed if you're not reading what was asked for, what the village asked to be created. And one of the things I'd like to point out in reading it, it had about, I haven't counted them, it had about 16 specifications of things that it wanted out of the design. One of them said, allow multifamily residential in the mixed-use development. All the other ones were about a commercial development and what the impact would be on 4th Street, on our commercial district, on revitalizing it and encouraging more economic development. I submit that this plan as proposed is not meeting that requirement, and therefore, for that reason alone, this should be rejected it should be reviewed and rejected as a proposal because it's not meeting what it was asked for, what the council, what the Board of Trustees had requested, what the RFP had requested, is not being met by this proposal of 4 lots of residential and 2 lots of commercial. One of the things that it was required was that the site would have integrated commercial retail spaces on both Osuna and 4th Street, which it does, and a plaza-like area at the corner where there's a small opening, there's a small patio there, but there's not a plaza. And that seems to flagrantly violate what was requested here and would seem like there should be if this plan is going to be accepted, that Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan needs to be amended to include what's now being presented to us. And that's been my major complaint all along about this project, was that this has been promised to us as a commercial development and sold to us as a commercial development. We bought the land to create a commercial development, and we're being presented with a residential development that has some commercial with it. So I think that whole process was being abrogated by the development plan, the development agreement, and what's happened in the process.
The speaker's time has expired.
I request that you give me a couple more minutes to be able to finish my thoughts. This is a major piece, and I would like that consideration, please.
Yes.
Thank you. I really resent the applicant speaking here after the attorney saying, you need to think of this as a blank slate, and he comes back and tells you, you have to acknowledge that there's a plan that was already approved and you can't deviate from that. I think that's really disrespectful of us and our process, and it's been something that I've experienced the whole time from this developer, is that he is not at all interested in what we, the residents, the investors in this project want out of this project. He has been committed to doing what he wanted and not really open to hearing anything about what we, the owners of this land, and who have hired them to do our work, to do this work, that he feels like he doesn't have to listen to us. And that just, it makes it me really hard to feel very kindly towards this development, because he's shut us out. I mean, the whole process of this was, we asked to have input, and it's been done and built intentionally ignoring our input, even though they knew that that was a possibility. And now they expect you to honor that they've built it, so therefore we can't do anything about it, when they chose to build it when they knew they didn't have valid permits. One of the lines in the development agreement that they say says that the permits are not final until all appeals have been completed. So they have been in violation of their development agreement with the village by their very construction that's gone on for the last 1.5 to 2 years. So there's just,
Mr. Don.
I would like to be kind to them, but I find that they've been really unkind to us, disrespectful to us, and they've caused us, along with the former mayor, to spend a lot of money to be able to get to the place we are now. A lot of money from village residents that didn't need to be spent. But as for this development, I think that we need to be able to say that they're still valid to say, we want the parking to be contained within the space that they have assigned for that process. We have specific requirements. that there was an agreement made, that agreement was not valid given what was said. So that the piece to say, I don't know whether the agreement is valid or not, but that you need to say what you want without having to be hemmed in by what they've already done and what's already gone before us, because those agreements are all somewhat up in the air. And the major piece about that was that we, the public, were left out of this process.
And I believe that's what we're trying to clear. So beside your recommendation to have each parcel hold its own parking, is there any other recommendation you have?
I really think that we need to have the plan for what the traffic this is going to add to, and what is wanted for Fourth and Osuna, and for Osuna as an entryway, that those questions need to be answered before we agree to what we are going to build here. It's really hard that they've already built it, but that's still a piece that I think we need to say, what do we think we should have as a road coming in? What do we want to have as an intersection here? And do we want this much residential on this site? This was intended to be a commercial site.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Commissioners, point of order. Please wrap up your comments because there are other people who may want to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. That this is prime commercial land that is now being squandered on residential. There is not another piece of land in the village that has the same visibility, the same being a village center elsewhere in this village that matches what this project is. And I think that converting it to a residential development as opposed to a commercial development is a disservice to the village and is going to cost the village a lot more money.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to speak? Camille, if you will once again introduce
Please state
yourself for
your
the
name and
record.
address.
Thank you. Camille Vados, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico, 87107. In reference to infrastructure, because I turned from 4th onto Osuna quite frequently to access my medical care. And inevitably, I'm envisioning trucks, how they can make that turn from 4th Street onto Osuna, because there's a solid piece of concrete. And I'm not a specialist, but I can make that comment. It's not safe. And also, in reference to parking, is there provisions for ADA guideline parking? Because now that I have a disability, parking is really important for any, you can't just expect this handicap parking to be there. It has to be designed, it has to be presented beforehand, not after the fact. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Google.
God, I guess. It's turned off.
I didn't stand up when you asked to be sworn in, so do I need to do that now?
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do. I'm Julia Mummert. I live at 330 Vineyard Road Northwest. That is Vineyard between 2nd and 4th Street. We are going to bring this up as much as possible in meetings to come, but with the 2 entrances on 4th Street. I don't want to be a defeatist, but the building is built, and we feel about that the way we feel about that. And so I understand we're supposed to be operating, but with the two entrances on 4th Street and the entrance on one entrance on Osuna, I don't want to become an enemy of my neighbors who are hoping for more on Osuna. You know, they're happy maybe with the one entrance on Osuna. The two entrances on 4th Street, and there's a lot of us. There's Willow, there's Vineyard, there's going to be a couple of streets on the north side of Osuna. We already, that traffic study was done very recently. I mean, we are like 4 times the amount of traffic on Vineyard as any other road or street in the village. That was brought up several months ago. I don't know if it was Board of Trustees or P&Z. So we're just going to keep bringing that up as much as possible. This traffic is going to be crazy, especially with the density housing or whatever we're discussing at the moment. So I felt like I wanted to bring that in as a tangent. And I realize that's not possibly, but it's relevant. It's very much relevant to what's going forward. So we just ask for your keeping that consistently in your your thoughts as we have to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Darnell, is there anyone online that would like to address this question or this issue? No. Okay, with that, let's go to commissioners' discussion. Commissioner Martinez?
I'm going to get into a little discussion about the elephant in the room, which is parking. And I appreciate, I think that's one of the main ones. But what I want to do is I want to bring up the code. The code has 1 parking per unit, okay? So I think that what we need to do as commissioners, we need to make sure that we change that as we progress from 1 to 1.5. Because of the way it is informed right now with 1, there is definitely a deficiency. And I agree with you that because we're not getting any profit off of this one, and where we're going to get the profit off of is the commercial usage, their conversation about using their parking for the apartments is something that needs to be discussed. And we really need to address that, because I don't think it's fair for our businesses where we're going to get the gross receipts off of it to be burdened by their needing to use their parking and making it inappropriate. And who knows what's going to come out of the disagreement for parking in trying to get to an apartment or trying to get into your hotel. So I think I wanted to bring it to you because it is a problem. There's nothing that we possibly can discuss about it because it is code and it is 1 per unit and they follow the code. But the issue is in the future, I think that we need to change it to 1.5, number 1. And if there's something that we can do to allow us to have discussions with the other commercial units, not having to take the burden of the apartment parking should be part of our discussion for parking. And that's what I needed to put into this discussion.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Baldwin.
Thank you. Parking seems to be the theme, because I think it is something that sort of can really determine any number of things. So I've got a couple of questions, and I don't know if some of them will be probably to Director Hill, some of them will be to the applicant's representative. Heck, Attorney Chappell may get pulled into this whole thing. So right now, if I understand correctly, the parking is being spread across all 6 tracks as if it is one. It's a project site, but almost as if it's one ownership. And my understanding is it's not necessarily. It phases, and as things phase, the owner changes. And if the parking for some buildings are in a place that is no longer accessible because it's been sold and you've got different owners, how do you envision that working? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is the intent to have this be held as a single ownership, or is it intended to be sold over the course of time? Is Palindrome acting as a developer owner holding in the future, or is it a developer with the intent to sell? That's 2. 3, because that affects how things are set up on this site here. And then 3, there's, obviously, gross receipts is kind of, revenue is a huge piece of the purpose of the village, and in its concept, it's really clear would come into play in terms of the retail, ground floor retail, the hotel, the grocery. And I just want to sort of on the record clarifying, rental income and property management is a commercial activity. How is gross receipts treated in that transaction? I want it for the record, just because I want people to understand, so it's really clear.
Okay.
So, have at it. 1, 2, 3.
Looks like they are conferring, so. Director Hill, can you address the gross receipts on apartment rentals?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, and Commissioner Baldwin, it's my understanding that the apartment units will not generate GRT.
As well as they will not generate property tax as well, I believe, because they're owned by the county. At least that's what's been in the news. So is that true or is that not? The county won't pay property tax to itself.
Madam Chairman, I got to this after all of this had been done and the cases had sort of been settled. My understanding from looking at it is the village gets gross receipts tax on the construction of the apartment. They will not get gross receipts tax. There is no gross receipts tax on rent of any kind. I haven't seen all of the base documents, but typically for property that is owned by the county, and right now 1, 2, and 3 are owned by the county, as a part of doing a revenue bond, they are exempt from property taxes for some period of time. And I haven't seen what the abatement period is. Sometimes it's permanent, sometimes it's 10 years, but there will be an abatement, so there'll be no property tax, no gross receipts tax on the multifamily in the foreseeable future.
But what about the retail?
What's that?
The ground floor retail would be subject to gross receipts tax. If it's
Yes, because, Madam Chair and Commissioner Baldwin, retail sales all subject to gross receipts tax unless they are a whole, retail are, but some places could be commercial that are wholesale, and they do not have to pay gross receipts tax because the ultimate user has to pay it. Hotels and people don't pay gross receipts tax. They say a different kind of tax, but it's basically the same kind of tax. Those kind of projects are not exempt from ad valorem to property taxes either.
Thank you.
So which items are you still seeking? Yes, you're still seeking responses on.
About the intent, is Palindrome intending to not only develop but to own, and is their intent to sell? Because my understanding is that as development proceeds, there will be a transfer of ownership. And so to the earlier question of the county owns something now, is the intent for the county to hold it? Is the intent for it to be sold? How does that transfer intended for this tracks 1, 2, and 3?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, Palindrome is a developer owner, and the intention for all 6 parcels is to develop and own those parcels in perpetuity. Mr. Chappell is correct that Bernalillo County is the owner of parcels 1, 2, and 3, and that is their mechanism for giving affordable housing projects a property tax exemption. It's part of the many parts and pieces that make it possible to build a project like this financially. And the affordability period is 30 years. And I believe Bernalillo County's ownership matches that period. The other 3 parcels, 4, 5, and 6, well, let's say 4 and 6, that have commercial uses will generate gross receipts tax. There is, I believe on the village website, I don't know if it's still there now, but there was a study of the gross receipts tax expected to be generated by the entire Village Center project. And there is about 13,000 square feet of commercial retail ground floor retail in the building on parcel 1. That's part of this site development plan application. That those are 28 micro retail spaces, similar to what Palindrome did at the Elvado Motel. You can see those, they're very successful. We find that model to be the best way to do brick and mortar commercial. It allows entrepreneurs who are just starting a business to have a really easy way to get into a place that they don't have to sign a lease for 3,000 square feet of space and pay a contractor to build out the space. They can rent this small little space that serves their needs. All utilities are included in the rent, and there's a lot of demand for those spaces at the Elvado. It's always hopping over there, and these are local entrepreneurs who are just starting a business. They might not always succeed, but the ones that don't make it, there's always someone waiting to fill that space right after them. So I do expect a lot of gross receipts would be generated by the commercial activity in that use on parcel 1.
Thank you.
Just one point of clarification, Madam Chair and Chairman, Commissioner Baldwin. When you look at these things, one of the things you need to realize, we all need to realize, is that even though Palindrome has a business plan today, and I don't doubt that business plan, I've not found anything in the documents that would prohibit the property being sold to another investor at any point in time. So in answer to your question, I think it's great that Palindrome plans to own them, but there's nothing legally that would keep them from being transferred to another investor. So that's the context in which you need to look at that question.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I believe he's correct. But I will say that any entity that would ever want to buy one of those parcels would only buy it if they expected it to be generating a significant amount of profit, which would therefore generate a significant amount of gross receipts tax. The hotel, for example, Palindrome currently owns and operates 3 hotels, has no intention to sell any of those. But if we ever wanted to sell one, no one's going to buy that hotel if they don't think it's going to be profitable for them. So any purchaser in the future would be buying that with the intention of generating even more profit from it than we were able to, and therefore generating even more gross receipts tax. I feel like I should address all of the other questions and comments that have been raised tonight on the site development plan. And while we're talking about the possibility of a sale of any one of these parcels, I should mention that the alternative parking plan that I mentioned earlier, 2 points I want to make on that. First, to address Commissioner Martinez, I don't think it's accurate to describe the apartments using the parking for other uses. It may be parking that's located on another parcel, but the required number of spaces for those other uses would all be there. So there would be all of the required parking spaces for the hotel, for the grocery store. And the master plan, which we submitted, which was approved, and we moved forward to build the parking as shown on that master plan, basically limits us in the future, or anyone else who would want to develop that, to building a use that meets the parking that's there. We couldn't make the hotel any bigger than we wanted to make it because we've only built the parking to support the hotel as big as we showed it. Does that make sense? Like, we planned the hotel to be a certain number of square feet, a certain number of rooms. Therefore, it requires a certain number of parking spaces. Those parking spaces are in the site plan, have been built. Therefore, you couldn't make the hotel any bigger than that was planned for, because we wouldn't be allowed to. We'd have to submit for parcel 4 a site development plan spelling out, here's how big this building is going to be, here's the uses, here's the required number of parking spaces, and here are the parking spaces. So the parking will always be code compliant and will always meet what the code says the need is for parking for all of these proposed uses. Furthermore, as part of the recorded plat, there was a document recorded that is a cross-site parking agreement, and that recorded agreement runs with the land in the parlance, which means any owner of any of those parcels will always have to honor that agreement that all users of all 6 parcels can park on any of the 6 parcels. So even if we built the hotel and sold it to someone else, they couldn't put up a sign and say, this is hotel parking only. All the parking is for all the uses, and that's a recorded document. Of course, we're here to start this plat process over, but we wouldn't change that. We don't intend to change that. While we're talking about parking, this lady mentioned ADA parking. Just let me assure you that all ADA parking requirements are met. There's no way we would have had the master plan approved if that didn't already include all of the ADA parking that's required.
Commissioner Martinez.
I'd like to continue on addressing your comment. I agree that the code was followed, but the difference between code and reality is what we have to deal with in this village. And when you get 1 unit and 1 parking place and you have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, et cetera, I truly believe that the deficiency is definitely there. And now that you brought up the other thing, that nobody else can put up signs that you can't park because of a document that was signed, I think that we definitely need to figure out and address it. And I'm talking to us in the other parcels, because we can't do anything with this one. But when we really look at the amount of units, and when we really put reality to how many cars are going to be parking in there, I think that we have to recognize that the overage, which is a reality, is definitely going over there. And because they can't change that, can we do something when it comes to us at the next phase? And I'm just planting it in our ears, because I think I think on everybody's point of parking is critical. And I think that we just need to address it for the best interest of everybody involved, the hotels, the shopping centers, and the apartments. That was my comment.
Commissioner Edward.
I'm going to keep my comments at this moment just at the parking. So why doesn't the plan consider underground parking?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, there's just no way we could make that financially feasible. Being so close to the river, the water table is really high. So to build underground parking, you basically have to build a waterproof bathtub. Mm-hmm. Even if that wasn't a consideration, it's extremely expensive to build an underground parking garage, and there's no way the project would pencil with an underground parking garage.
But you guys didn't pay for the land, is that correct?
We paid what was considered fair market value.
$1?
All right. So one of the concerns I have in looking at the site development plan with parking, I'm trying to get an understanding of scalability. You guys have a performance event area, and you've got a few other things, outdoor amenity space, multifamily. One of my concerns is that how is the parking going to be met when you have one of these events, and to the extent, I want you guys to be wildly successful, because if you're wildly successful, my neighborhood is happy, we're economically doing well, we're supporting each other. When you're on a winning team, it's easy to be positive. But my concern is that the parking kind of really only addresses some of the uses only internal to the project. And if this area is supposed to be for a public purpose, it doesn't feel very public when you're going to have an event there. How are people actually going to enjoy the public event if it doesn't appear as though that the people from within the... Can you kind of address where I'm coming with that? I mean, how do you anticipate a festival where there's going to be 500 people there?
Commissioner Edward, I would love to have that problem. I hope that there are events that are so successful that that's a problem. I can't really say that's going to happen.
Well, that bothers me. It bothers me that you're not planning to be successful.
All I can say is that there's a code requirement for a number of parking spaces for certain uses, and we met that requirement. I am of the opinion that these uses would ebb and flow during different times of the day, and
so here's the thing that you're telling to me. We're going to live right up to the line, and we're not going to be practical. The thing that New Mexico and Albuquerque and the Village suffers from is we're going to build it just barely big enough. Just barely big enough, and do we really have to build it? And that leads to a significant amount of breakdown and failure. And it bothers me that you're thinking in such small terms. When people think in small terms, they're not thinking about being successful, and they're not thinking about the greater community at large. I've noticed, and I've read through most of these documents, none of the investors live within these communities. They don't live here. They don't have to deal with the elements relating to this. And when my kids drive by and they look at it, I want them to be able to want to go there, and I want these businesses to be successful. And if they're being designed at the minimum tolerances, I know human nature, it's not going to be successful, and it's going to get a bad reputation. And I don't want my community to have a bad reputation. And I don't think your project does either. And you're telling me that you really haven't thought about these contingencies. The contingency to be successful, which means I think you're gonna fail in some ways, and we're gonna suffer the consequences. Planning to be successful, that's why a lot of people fail.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I wouldn't say that we haven't thought about that. I think that there are many ways you could solve the problem if really was a problem that this property was so successful that there was that problem. Look up and down 4th Street. There are many parking lots that are mostly empty during most of the day. There's a possibility to have agreements with those property owners for overflow parking. Furthermore, I'd like to just address the logistics of the site. If you start wanting to build more and more and more parking spaces for any use, you end up with an ocean of asphalt and one small building. And that is what we see in most of Albuquerque.
I agree.
And how many of those parking lots are 100% full for how much of the day? Or how often do you drive by and you see 25% of the parking lot has cars in it, and the rest of the time you have a whole bunch of asphalt sitting there, causing an urban heat island effect.
I totally agree with you. One of the concerns I do have too is you say that Building 6 is going to be a grocery store. And I look at the size of that, and I'd like to know what grocery chain fits the parameters of the square footage that you have provided there.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, we don't envision it as a chain. We don't put chains in our properties. We're picturing something similar to the co-op. We've talked to a number of different possible tenants. And it is actually a quite large space. It might not look that large on the site plan, but it is quite a bit of space. It's not the size of Smith's on 4th Street, but it's definitely big enough for a neighborhood market that could have everything that you would need. I mean, think about how big the co-op on Rio Grande is. It's probably a quarter the size of what we're showing on parcel 6.
They're building a new one at 12th and Indian School.
True. May I also just go back to the fact we're not talking about those parcels right now. When we are talking about the cross-site parking agreement. So.
Do you guys have an idea what percentage of the grocery seats will be paid out of building number 6, considering it's groceries?
I would have to go back and look at the study that was done.
Okay. A couple of things that I'm concerned with, and I bring up this grocery thing a little bit. I was at Smith's today, and I've talked about at these meetings several times about Smith's grocery store and the development down the street. And I think the thing that causes a lot of concern for myself and a lot of people in the village is that the development where Smith's is on 4th Street is like a doghouse. The thing is not maintained. 60 trees were planted. I looked at all these trees on here and I'm thinking, wow, that's awesome. But if you guys manage this the same way that Smith site is managed, it's going to be ugly. That is ugly over there. It's not well maintained. They're all dead. Most of them are cut down. Any of the ones that are there are half alive. And part of my concern is that project, just like this project, is broken up into different tracks, and it's not all owned by the same entities. And nobody really wants to take any ownership of that site plan. The way that they manage themselves is part of the genesis of the concern that this community has felt with the way you guys have come into here. And there's no assurances that it's going to be maintained. And that's why we want you to be successful, because we want you to maintain it. And we want it to look good, because that Smith's, I've been to 10 different Smith's in this town, and there's a Smith's, and then there's a Smith's. They're completely different stores, and it's all on the back of the developer and the property owner. And I hope that when you look at this plan, you envision it to look good from day 1 through day 1 million. Because honestly, within the city of Albuquerque, property owners, they get these architectural awards when they're built, and then they let them go to crap. And most of these investors don't live here. This is not their community. They don't give a crap. We're a profit center.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I don't think you have to worry about that on this property. I think I would invite you to visit other palindrome properties in town and see how they're maintained. And it's not in our financial interest to let them look bad. People won't want to visit the hotel if it doesn't look good. And we have more pride than that, basically.
But we don't have any assurances that you're going to continue to own it that way. And these are the things, these are the elements that our community wants to be. We want to be not minimized, and we don't want to be designed down to the smallest element to fine cut a tooth on this. We want it to be maintained, and we want it to look good. We want the architecture to look good. And do you live here?
I do, sir.
Good. And so you can go over there and hold your own company's feet to the fire, or whoever buys it from you.
Well, Commissioner Edward, as I said, we don't have any plans to sell it. Haven't sold anyone any hotel or anything before, so that is a hypothetical that I can't really address. But all I can say is we maintain our properties, and we like them to look nice, and we want people to go there.
Okay.
And in the highly unlikely event that someone were to, say, buy the hotel or grocery store, I think they would also want to maintain it because that makes you more financially successful. I don't think someone would say, yeah, I'm going to spend millions of dollars to buy that hotel and then just let it run to the ground, and no sane person would make a decision like that. I don't know, maybe Mr. Hill can answer this, but I do believe the village code has some kind of site maintenance requirements, and there is code enforcement for if you are not letting your site, fall apart.
We've had a lot of discussions about code enforcement here, so. One of the questions I have for you is, how are those stores with facing fronts to the west with all glass, how are they going to maintain a degree of walkability and desirability when there's no shade? And there's like a massive void of trees along that 4th Street edge, and it creates a very hard effect.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, all of those spaces do have awnings facing west, and I'm not sure if it's that apparent on the site plan, but there are quite a few trees along 4th Street in the actual design. Basically as many as we could fit. And the walkability, well, I don't know how you can get any more walkable than being right on the sidewalk. And to your question earlier about location of the property line, my answer was the property line is at the back of the sidewalk. To expand on that, that's at the back of the public sidewalk. When you go past that, there's another 12 feet of pavers that we intentionally designed to match the pavers on the 4th Street project farther north, as well as a lot of plantings, not just trees, but all kinds of, water miser, local native plants. So there's a lot, it's going to be beautiful along that. I'd also like to add that the zoning code requires ground floor commercial on 4th Street at that location.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend that you put in more trees there, because I think that it would soften the effect of the project. It's going to provide shade, and I think you're going to be more successful. And again, do we want to live up to the minimum standard, or do we want to be at a higher standard?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Edward and the rest of the commission, let me just remind you that we're here on the sketch review site development plan for tracks 1, 2, and 3 only.
Right, if you take a look at.
So 4, 5, and 6 will be at another time.
Okay. So my comments about the trees would be for the one tree on 4th Street for the entire length of tract 1. It shows one tree.
Commissioner Edward, I can assure you there are a lot more than that in reality.
Then I'd like to see your plan that shows that, because it doesn't show it here.
I can show you that.
Great.
Commissioner Tagliapetra.
Hi. So you said that the micro businesses are only in 1 and 2?
Only in building 1, Commissioner.
Only in building 1. How do they access them? From the front or from the back side where the parking is?
As the zoning code requires, the entire 4th Street frontage of the ground floor is retail, as well as along the entry driveway off of 4th Street. Building 1's ground floor faces that entry driveway, and all of that is retail as well. There is street parking along that entry driveway right in front of those retail spaces. And as I've discussed, the cross-site parking agreement assures that there is the code required amount of parking available on the site.
Do they enter from the front, or can they enter from the back where the parking is?
From the front, Commissioner.
Okay. So are your parking spots correct with handicap markings?
The ADA requirements have all been met.
So for building 1 and 2, you only need 8 handicap spots for the residents and for people that will shop?
I would have to look at the plan, but
looks like there's 2 for the residents. There's 2 out here and a walkway in on the building 1. There's 2 on building 2. Then there's 2 over for building 2. I'm actually on the one that's blue with the trees on it. That one. That one.
Commissioner, I believe you're correct. There are 8 shown for those.
So
two
where is a
buildings.
handicapped person supposed to park, and how far are you expecting them to walk?
The ADA spaces, Commissioner, are located at the closest point to those uses. That's correct, ma'am.
So you think that there's not going to be, but, I mean, what if you have 10 handicap people in the first building?
We could always add more ADA spaces if that was required, if that was needed. The ADA parking percentages are not, we don't make those rules, and I can't really speak to why they require the number of spaces that they do, but I'm sure those rules were made by people a lot smarter than I am.
But it could be a hindrance to a handicapped person trying to go to those shops that we're going to get our gross receipts from. It could be for only, well, 2 spots for them.
Commissioner, I don't really know how to answer that. What I can tell you is that the handicap spaces are located as close as they can be to the intended uses, and all the walkways on the site meet ADA requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Director Hill, can you address this? Has staff taken a look, and are you in agreement that this is the appropriate amount of handicap spaces for the intended use?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I cannot confirm the number given the proposed square footages, but what I can assure you is that if this is submitted for a preliminary review, every single detail of parking will be exhibited on these plans. That is a requirement. And so the exhibit of the requirements will have to demonstrate compliance with our codes. But I can't confirm whether this, given the square footages here, I can't confirm that.
Okay. So Commissioner Tegla-Petra, are you making a recommendation that this be double-checked and perhaps
I would truly like the handicap parking checked, because how many residences are there in 1 and 2? How many are in 1? How many units are in 1? And how many units are in 2? And how many units are in 3?
Commissioner, 65 units in 1, 78, I believe, in 2, and 60 in 3.
And the total?
204.
204, that's what I'm aware of, Commissioner.
Well, I know the 204, I was just, because like on number 3, they have 4 spaces for them back on 3. But I'm just thinking that if we have handicapped residences and if we have handicapped people wanting to shop, I think that this is a huge deterrence.
And Commissioners, just a note on this, this does not appear to be to spec, but more of an illustration. So if this is submitted for preliminary review under our regulations, it will look very, very different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So does this?
Thank you.
So then, as a follow-up to that comment, Director Hill, under the sketch review site development plan, are we looking at the appropriate document, or should we be looking at a different document during this discussion?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, just a reminder, the document is more of an illustrated exhibit for the purposes of this review. Spec down to code detail was not needed for this, but in future reviews, the applicant is required to demonstrate that compliance for every single square foot of this environment. It's not required here.
Thank you. Commissioner Haywood.
I'm addressing the setbacks and the landscaping along Osuna, which is the north side of tracts 1, 2, and 3. There's a 5-foot setback requirement, which looks like it's been met. and then there's a 4-foot, what I'm assuming is a county-owned sidewalk. And my understanding of the ownership is that the county owns a sidewalk and you own everything from the sidewalk back, correct?
Commissioner Haywood, the county does own these properties. I don't know who legally owns the right-of-ways, though.
So in an overall scheme, I can't not see what's already built, but even reading a plan, you've got a 4-foot sidewalk and then a 5-foot landscaping that's treated as a separate element. And the only way I can swallow a 3.5-story structure with 0 landscaping is if the sidewalk and the landscaping is treated as one element, not 2 elements. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like in an urban context, your average sidewalk is 15 feet wide, right? Because you've got trees, you've got places for people to walk. So the 0 setback from the street is more palatable than if it was treated as 2 separate elements. This is being treated as 2 separate elements. And even though there's graphically shown as trees, you cannot get trees in 5 feet, especially on the north side of a building. They just won't make it. So my recommendation is that this landscaping element and the sidewalk are combined into one design element.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Haywood, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by one design element?
Instead of just being a sidewalk with peripheral landscaping, it's all combined into one, so that the sidewalk and the landscaping is integral to each other. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I'm not really sure what you mean.
I think one of the things that she's concerned with was the 3-story building. There's not many trees that are going to do well in the shadow of those buildings within the width, and that there should be an incorporation of the trees with the sidewalk and the landscaping such that they're integrated in a way that they can be successful.
So you don't just have a strip of sidewalk and then a strip of landscaping. Both of them are integral to each other. And you've got landscaping and sidewalk perhaps meandering, I don't know. But at the moment, you just have a strip of concrete and a strip of landscaping on this plan that I'm looking at. And I think that is poor design.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Haywood, the sidewalk is within the right-of-way and is required to be where it is. We don't have any choice in that. We have to put the sidewalk where it is. And then the 5-foot width of the planting area is, you mentioned a 5-foot setback. Most of the time when people think of setbacks, they're thinking of a maximum setback. A minimum setback, but in our case, this is a maximum setback. Our building cannot be any farther from the property line than 5 feet as a requirement of the zoning code. We have to put the building that close, and we have to put the sidewalk outside of the property line within the right-of-way. So the only way, I think, to do what you're talking about would be to add more paving within the 5-foot maximum setback, which would take away planting area for the trees. But let me draw your attention to, if we go to the next page after this one. So page 9 of the PDF, which is the site plan for parcel 1, does a much better job of illustrating along 4th Street. I think what we've done there does match with what you're talking about. Again, we have the public sidewalk, which is in the right-of-way. And on that right-of-way, the requirement is for a landscape strip between the curb and the sidewalk. And then behind that, as I was describing a few minutes ago, we have, again, a maximum setback. The building is required to be a certain distance, required to be close to the property line. But we worked within that area to create an urban feeling with a meandering sidewalk, planting areas. The areas that you see that have what we call stipple dots, those are planted areas, and each and every one of those has at least one, usually 2 trees. And then behind that, between those and the building and connecting that building to the public sidewalk is all those pavers. So it is, I think, what you're describing.
Is there any way that the county could come, I mean, the county owns tract 1, 2, and 3, right? And they own that sidewalk. If it's in the right of way?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Haywood, the right-of-way for 4th Street is probably...
No, Osuna.
Osuna is probably owned by the village, or it's under the control of the village. The county doesn't have control of the rights-of-way within the village proper. They own those parcels because they own them as a part of a financing technique to support the bonds, but the right-of-ways are in essence owned and controlled by the village.
Well, then my recommendation would be the village and the county come up with a cooperative agreement to come up with a better design than that.
Did anybody notice that he said that this is an urban design?
Yes, I did, which is exactly what I don't like about it.
Commissioner Baldwin?
So following up on Commissioner Haywood, because this is exactly something that I have been talking to Director Hill about. You look at 4th, you've got, like you said, the travel lane, a landscape lane, buffer, a sidewalk, and so when you've got the curb cuts, they're cutting up through the landscape buffer, but the sidewalk is a continuous line as opposed to curb cuts across the sidewalk, which if you're a chair user or anything, it's a nightmare. Compare that, which is, again, gives you distance from the traffic on 4th. It gives you a buffer. It feels comfortable. The utilities are placed in a way that also doesn't inhibit pedestrian and, in that case, frankly, bike. I wouldn't be on a bicycle on 4th there. But you turn the corner on Osuna, and the utilities are in the middle of the sidewalk, whether it's a fire hydrant or a utility pole or whatever. There's no buffer to 4th. And it's unclear how that can be addressed. But I totally underscore Commissioner Hayward's point, which is it is a very, very, very unpleasant pedestrian environment on Osuna when you compared to what is clearly a much nicer, much more softened environment walking on 4th, which needed it, don't get me wrong. It's just that Osuna deserves the same good feeling as a pedestrian. And so I don't know what is possible. That feels more possible to reconfigure than an already built 3-story building. And so what can we do to make that a better thing? Like stretch yourselves, have conversations with the village and the county, because that seems like it is something you can stretch.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, what you're talking about is certainly worth considering. All I can say is Palindrome responded to an RFP that the village issued. The village did the planning of these parcels, owned all these parcels when it issued the RFP, owns the right-of-way, and could have widened the right-of-way in Osuna before issuing the RFP. We responded to an RFP that said, here's a site, here's what we want someone to come and build on it. We proposed what we felt met the requirements of the RFP. The village at the time also felt that what we proposed met the requirements of the RFP, and all I can say is that every step along the way since then, we've done exactly what we were told by the village was required of us. And the improvements we've done in the right-of-ways on 4th and Osuna were covered under a different permit issued by the village, which I've discussed with Mr. Hill recently. And Those are, civil engineers designed those. There are so many detailed requirements for what you do in a right-of-way, how are sidewalks built, where can the sidewalk be. I absolutely agree with you that walking on a 3 or 4 foot wide sidewalk with cars arm's length away is not pleasant. And I grew up here in Albuquerque. I've spent my whole life walking on those sidewalks. I don't like it any more than anyone else. And I love the way it works on 4th Street. The right-of-way on Osuna is not wide enough to do that. Well, what you're proposing of moving the sidewalk close to the building and moving the trees out towards the curb is possible. There's a lot of things that would need to change for that to be allowed. The rules for the right-of-way, the rules for the site, certainly worth looking at.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, please. And I'm actually going to piggyback off of both Gwen's and Claire's comments. Claire was saying that a tree cannot grow in 5 foot. The top of a tree is bigger than 5 foot. It can't grow. So those trees will die. So she's suggesting a meandering sidewalk so that on the meander where the sidewalk was closer to the property, you could put a tree closer to the road there, and then it would at least have another 4 foot.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Talley-Pietra, I do think there are minimum width requirements for a sidewalk, and while you could meander the sidewalk, the total width from the building to the curb doesn't change. So if you've got 4 feet of sidewalk that you have to put there, because that's the rule, you've got the same 5 feet for the tree, whether it's on one side or the other. It wouldn't end up being wider unless we were allowed to make the sidewalk narrower.
The tree would move toward the road versus toward the building. So yes, it would be more.
Okay.
Do you not understand?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Talley-Pietra, I think what you're saying is the tree would have more room away from the building to grow wider, the total width from the tree.
For the canopy of the tree.
I understand.
A tree canopy is not going to survive with 5 foot of space. It's going to ruin the side of your building.
Yeah, Commissioner Talley-Pietra, all I can say is we followed the rules that were set out for us to follow. We have this maximum 5 foot setback, and there is a list of approved trees to plant in a condition like that, and we proposed trees that are on that list. So that's why it is the way it is.
So commissioners, a number of you have spoke about the tree issue and the canopy. I believe this is a recommendation coming from this commission that we want to include in the notes, that this tree placement and canopy be included in consideration.
Director Hill, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. In the master plan, were the setbacks not something like between 5 and 25 feet for this village center?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Drew, yes, that's the range that the VC zone allows.
So this building could have been set back 25 feet from Osuna?
From Madam Chair, Commissioner Drew, from a regulation standpoint, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That could have been done.
Thank you.
Mr. Chappell, I believe you have something.
Madam Chairman and Commissioner, in the VC zone, and I'll have to discuss it with Mr. Hill, I think the maximum setback is 5 feet. That's different than any zone in the village. And I don't know exactly why they came up with 5 feet, but the concept was to put the building close to the street and require all the parking to be behind the street, the buildings, as opposed to have asphalt parking in front of the buildings like all of the strip centers in town. That's the discussion I remember. but I think the maximum setback under the VC ordinance is 5 feet in the project zone.
And Commissioner, stand corrected, and what I'm recalling now is the relationship between the maximum setback and the height of the building to provide space for parking on the interior.
Okay.
So that is the design. Yes.
Thank you.
Other recommendations from the commission?
I just want to say that you're in a hot seat here, dude. And I appreciate, the candor that you're bringing in here, and so it's you probably feel a little unfairly treated, but at the same time, we're coming in after the fact, so it makes for an awkward dance, to say the least. One of the things we're coming in here talking about just parcels 1, 2, and 3. And I realize you've come in and you've said these are the things that we did them per what the village wanted and everything else like that. But this is a body where we're trying to come up with ideas to make recommendations. And I think it would be better received if you say, okay, we'll consider that. Because otherwise, it doesn't sound like this is a collaborative process, which we're supposed to come back at the judge's demands. Am I correct? The judge's demands to kind of rethink this through and add some legitimacy to it. And otherwise, the way you keep talking, it sounds like you're giving us a stiff arm and you're not the Heisman Trophy winner.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I appreciate your feedback, and we'll definitely take into consideration the recommendations on Osuna for the right-of-way and the tree plantings and all the other recommendations you all have made this evening.
And Madam Chair, Commissioners, also to add, when the commission is focused on a particular subject, because it doesn't, we're looking at a concept that is not detailed. If you look at the descriptions of the sites in the boxes for parking, it only issues general parking. It doesn't list the ADA spaces required. So that's an illustration of the fact that this is not to spec. But where the commission has questions that can be alleviated by providing more information, that goes into the record, and that is something staff will recommend. So asking for more information is well within this discussion.
I do have one quick question. I don't know if it was discussed, and if it was, I was daydreaming, and I'm sorry, but it refers to the roads in here. These are private roads. So these are private roads to be built, maintained, reconstructed by the property owners. Is that correct? And these are not public thoroughfares?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, yes, you are correct.
Okay. Does that change anything as far as anything to consider? I mean, is the private road considered its own parking? I don't know. I'm just kind of curious, would it change it at some point they dedicated those as public roads? And would that ever happen or be possible, and would that change things for us?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, given that it is internal circulation, it is unlikely that we would see this dedicated to the public unless it was connected somehow with the larger network. But typically what we see in developments like this is that they are privatized because they're not connected. And so they are maintained internally.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, allow me to add a point on that. When I mentioned earlier, the parking agreement was recorded with the county in connection with the plat. There's a whole declaration of covenants that is recorded, which, as I said, runs with the land, is binding upon any future owner of any of these parcels. Part of that declaration of covenants addresses the maintenance of all the roads and parking and landscaping on site and requires the owners of these parcels to participate in that maintenance.
Okay. So I'm going to make a little bit of a joke here to discuss an issue which I just like to know if you thought about it. There used to be a gasoline company called Esso. And there was an old expression that if there was an Esso gas station on the corner, at a really busy intersection, somebody would drive through the gasoline station, the Esso, and they'd be in Esso. So traffic does back up on 4th Street at Osuna to that point. Have you guys contemplated traffic control and dealing with people cutting through there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, yes, we have.
Okay.
Those internal roads have various places intended for pedestrians to cross, and they are built as what we call a pedestrian table, which is basically a really wide, flat speed bump. So it's a different color of paving, so it's really clear to cars this is a space for pedestrians to cross. It slows traffic down. I really don't think many people will see those internal roadways on the site as a way to cut through the traffic, because it will actually be slower than waiting for the light.
It's the first thing I thought of when I looked at this plan.
So may I ask a couple of questions? I don't want it to be assumed, but I want to ask, fire and safety have reviewed the size of the roadways and ingress, egress for the appropriate spacing that they will need to maneuver within the property?
Madam Chair, while that is not a requirement of this stage, the sketch SDP submittal, I can say that yes, we have an approved Fire 1 plan, which is the site plan that the fire department reviews and approves to say the site provides the ingress, egress, circulation, truck access, all the things they need to serve these buildings.
So another question, although there seems to be much more residential usage than I was originally led to believe a couple of years ago when I was one of the Board of Trustees, I'm hearing, and I heard at that time too, that there was supposed to be a significant portion of this affordable housing that was going to be designated as senior, or at least available to seniors, which when we're reviewing the number of handicap spaces really causes an alarm, because many more seniors will be needing handicap space than your typical residential area. And I want to make a recommendation that that is taken into consideration.
Madam Chair, I can address that. That is something I hear about every day. For the last couple of years, I've been the one answering the emails that we get from people who reach out who want to live in this community. And there have been a lot of those emails, and almost all of them are from seniors, because the notion is out there that this is senior housing. And I can explain why that is. Number one, in the RFP response, there was something shown as senior housing. Number two, before I was with Palindrome, the financing mechanism used to build this project, just 1, 2, and 3, the affordable housing, is the federal low-income housing tax credit. When you apply for those tax credits, you pick one of a handful of categories of residential use. So you can pick senior, you can pick families, you can pick special needs. And originally, like I said, before I was with Palindrome, they put in an application for the federal tax credit for just parcel 3, building 3 alone. And that was under the senior category. And that building was designed with all of the features that seniors like to have. It has an elevator. It has, most of the parking on the site is permeable parking. This is part of our requirements for stormwater. You know, you have to make sure as much as possible the stormwater is reabsorbed into the water table on site. So part of the way you accomplish that is by permeable parking. However, on building 3, the entire parking lot is traditional asphalt paving, which is a lot easier for people to walk on. So it's better for seniors. Building 3 also has sitting areas, community rooms, all kinds of stuff that was put in there as it was designed for a senior project. Now, what happened was that application was not successful. The tax credits they applied for were not awarded. So then the first thing that happened when one of my first tasks when I started working at Palindrome was to submit the application for tax credits for all 3 parcels. And you have to pick just one. You can't say, these 2 parcels are family, this parcel's senior. You have to pick one for your whole project, so we picked family. Now, what that means is 100% of these units are open to seniors, and seniors are welcome to live in 100% of these units. Parcel 3, Building 3, still retains all of the design elements that were put in there to accommodate seniors. Buildings 1 and 2 were designed a little bit more with the family, like, demographic in mind. There's a playground as part of Building 2. There are 3-bedroom units in Buildings 1 and 2, and I believe Building 3 does not have 3 bedrooms. It only has 1 and 2-bedroom units. So Building 3 stayed as it was designed. And fair housing laws do not allow us to steer people. We can't say, hey, you're applying to this property, you're a senior, you might want to live in Building 3. We can't say that. All we can say is, here are the apartments that are available. You are welcome to choose whichever one fits your needs. So seniors are welcome to live in all of the apartments. None of them are reserved specifically for seniors. But the site, as I said, all of the walkways meet all ADA requirements. A person in a wheelchair would have no problem navigating the entire property from an accessible parking space to any door of any retail space or to any entrance to any of the buildings. And in Buildings 1 and 2, we don't have elevators, but we have accessible apartments on the ground floor in those buildings. In Building 3, the accessible apartments are throughout the building because there's an elevator that allows people to access all of those floors.
Thank you. Any other comments, recommendations from the board? Commissioner Martinez?
I just didn't know earlier if I had made a recommendation, but I'd like to make that recommendation that what we do is on the other units or other developments that we switch it over from a 1 to a 1.5 for parking per unit. That's just a recommendation.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is a matter of amending an ordinance which would become something of a case unto itself as far as research, drafting, public review, notice, and all those things. So there is a process for amending an ordinance. But this project is subject to our current regulations.
This project is in currently tracks 1, 2, and 3.
That is correct.
So 4, 5, and 6, should the policy ordinance be updated prior to their application, then it could be applied.
That's a possibility, but I'll let the attorney chime in on this.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, the city of Albuquerque tried that in the Uptown to change the rules once the project was sort of underway, and the court said you couldn't do that. So I think it would be very highly unlikely that it would be legal for the village to change the VC zone from what it is today in time or in the context of changing parking requirements and that sort of thing for the other phases within the project center.
Thank you for that update.
And just to add to that, what that means is that if this is not a possibility, and it sounds like it's not, other sites that are under this zone would be affected by that new change.
There is a possibility, Madam Chair, that you could do what is called an upzone which would be less restrictive, but a down zone that made it more restrictive, you can't do. So that was a blanket statement. It's not quite true, but if you're down zoning, which makes more restrictive, you can't do it. If you up zone to make it less restrictive, that's something that could be done.
I don't know if this is the time and place. Was the parking on some of this predicated upon the idea that this is like some sort of a mass transit thoroughfare?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I can't answer that. That was a decision made by the village a long time ago.
Do you know?
And Commissioner Edward, I didn't quite hear the question. Is this a?
Well, usually if there's mass transit that is close by, you know, the parking requirements are significantly different because people have this belief that people are going to be using the mass transit and not driving a car.
I'm not aware of that, but perhaps that was a consideration.
Okay.
I was here when the ordinance was adopted, but I didn't hear those discussions.
And one question about the senior housing. It was told to me one time that the senior housing project was going to be more of an assisted living facility where gross receipts taxes probably could be collected. Was that ever discussed, and is that a possibility for the future?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, as far as I know, that was not ever discussed, and the building wasn't designed to be an assisted living facility. It's a much different design for a building like that, as far as I know. Also, the tax credits that we got are for the project that we proposed, so
That's fine.
yeah, I don't think that's a possibility at this point.
Okay.
Any final recommendations?
So you just spoke about tax credits. Is that for 1, 2, and 3, or does that include, is it, what's the other one? What's the other property for?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Talipiazza, only 1, 2, and 3.
Only 1, 2, and 3 are restricted on low income or affordable housing, or whatever we want to say this. The other units that you're going to be making are not confined by this.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we stop, may I address some of the comments made by community
Please.
members? So let's start with Mr. Donovan's comments. He talked about how I started my presentation on the site development plan by presenting the master plan and talking about how that's why we did what we did, and he characterized that as disrespectful, and respectfully I would like to differ. I think that we prepared that master plan, and that shows respect for the process because that was the process that was presented to us. That was the requirement. We were told by the village explicitly, your first step is to submit a master plan for review. And once that master plan has been reviewed, and I will say it took many months of back and forth between our design team and the village for the village to feel satisfied with that master plan. Once we were told that once that master plan is set and approved, that's what you go on. When you submit things in the future, you need to submit things that are consistent with the master plan. So if we were to come in with a site development plan submittal that differed from the master plan, we'd be breaking the rules. We'd be doing it wrong. So I just want to say that, you know, we were doing what we were told we were supposed to do. So with all respect to the village, that is why we did what we did. And by presenting the master plan, I just wanted to give you all a bit of background on here's where we started. This is the document that we used to develop this sketch site development plan submittal. Mr. Donnelly also talked about the corner plaza, which I believe he said was in the
16 items.
Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan. So the design, you can see it here on page 9, does provide a very large corner plaza. I think it's about 30 feet by 60 feet. It has seating, trees. It's protected from the streets by some low walls. And it's directly adjacent to that corner retail space, which is the largest space. The corner retail space has areas, outdoor areas for seating or whatever that tenant wants to use them for. It's intended as a place to meet that intention of the Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan. And again, we were restricted by the maximum setbacks, so we couldn't really make it much bigger than it is. It's about as big as it can be because the buildings have to be that close to the property lines. Someone mentioned trucks turning from 4th Street onto Osuna. Since long before this project was ever even considered, there has always been a sign on northbound 4th Street that says no right turn for trucks onto Osuna. And it's always been the case. So there's really nothing we were able to do about that. Regarding the traffic, all I can say is another requirement we had to do. One of the very first things we did was order a traffic study from a licensed traffic engineer, someone who puts their stamp on that study and is liable for it and is bound by the requirements of their profession and of their licensing body. And they're not an employee of us. They're a third party that we were required to hire. And that traffic study is available on the village website as well. At least it was at one point on the page dedicated to the Village Center project. And they analyzed the proposed uses for all 6 parcels of the Village Center and found in their analysis that at peak AM and PM hours, like rush hour, the wait time in every direction at the 4th and Osuna intersection would be increased by less than 1 second by the traffic generated on the Village Center property. So that's in the study. It's on there to review. And as I mentioned, the site plan that shows the trees and stuff, I believe it's also on that page. There's an illustrated color site plan that shows with more accuracy than any of these documents all the trees and plantings that will be on 4th Street and Osuna, as well as throughout the site. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Okay. With that, unless I hear of anybody else suddenly wanting to make another comment or recommendation, I would ask for a motion to close the review for the sketch review of site development plan.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, this is a roll call vote once again. Commissioner Barrow.
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes.
Commissioner Edward.
Yes.
Commissioner Baldwin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tagliapetra.
Yes.
Commissioner Haywood.
Yes.
Commissioner Homan, yes. So that gives us a unanimous closing of the review. And once again, that was a review. Let the record show that the public hearing on SP 24-01, a request by Jim Stozer, agent for Palindrome Communities LLC, for a sketch review for site development plan for a site known as lots 1 through 12, and lot 14 is formally closed. So let's see. With that then, we will go on. Well, I want to thank all the attendees for coming to and participating with their comments. So with that, we'll go on to old business, of which there is none. We'll move on to new business, which then there is none as well. And reports, Director Hill.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, just to give a brief overview of, and I mentioned it in the staff report a little bit, what happens from here with these cases is that the applicant is going to be required to submit applications that are called preliminary, which call forth all the details and specifications in the village code. Now, the applicant has indicated that what they will submit next is a preliminary site development plan. So the preliminary site development plan will come to you first. The preliminary plating will come sometime after that. At this point, it is a matter of the applicant assembling this material so that we can schedule it. We saw an opportunity to have a hearing on October the 29th if certain things could be submitted and accomplished, and right now we're not sure if that can or will be done or not. So tentatively, the next hearing, unless something changes in October 29th, is a possibility. The next scheduled hearing will be Tuesday, November the 12th, at which time we expect some continuation of review of this project.
You mean November 12th?
November 12th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So October 29th or the other?
Either October 29th or November 12th. Yeah. So there is some uncertainty about that, but November 12th is a scheduled, pre-scheduled hearing.
At that meeting, it won't just be a review. It will be expecting a recommendation vote to be
Yes.
moved up.
Now, once a preliminary application comes before the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission will be in a position to consider a recommendation that goes to the Board of Trustees. Now, with a site development plan, it is preliminary here and recommended to go to the board. It becomes a final at the board, but the subdivision process is a little different. A preliminary that comes from here, from this Planning Commission, goes to the board as something called a final preliminary. And then the board would have to act on that to pave the way for something called a final plat, which would come before the Planning Commission and then return to the board. So there's a lot of dog legs, as I call them, in the platting process. But the site development plan goes from preliminary to final.
Yes, Commissioner Baldwin.
Dr. Hill, and I know that initially when the judge made the determination that a cure of the Open Meetings Act needed to be done through this process, there was a shot clock attached to it of, I think, 45 days from the, point of, I think of a certain decision after she made her ruling. What shot clock are we under currently?
Okay. Now, Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, I'll answer, and our attorney might want to chirp in, but the village has notified the court that being asked to facilitate a process means that it can only be done under our regulations and our publication and notification requirements. What is upon us is to engage that as efficiently as we can. But that is really all that, did I understand that correctly?
So we're not under a 45-day shot.
We're not under a
Okay,
45,
thank you.
but we are under an understanding that what we can do, we do.
Commissioner Baldwin, the court put some deadlines in. The first one was that Palindrome must submit within 10 days. That didn't happen for 30 days. They said it had to be complete in 45 days. We went through a whole process of seeing if through special meetings and everything else that you could even do it in 45 days. And we ran into a problem that to try to squeeze it that much would probably, it's in and of itself, be a violation of the Open Meetings Act, because that's the reason one reason had to go back through. So there has been a discussion about how to deal with the court We don't think the court, I'm not the one in court arguing these things, but I was present, that the court will have a problem as long as everyone is expeditiously moving forward. Because the court had no idea what the process was. That was a ruling she made at the end of the hearing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Apologies, I just want to address, the court's ruling was that Palindrome start the process within 10 days, and we did start the process within 10 days. We reached out to Director Hill to indicate our intention to submit. It wasn't possible to throw together this submittal within those 10 days, but we did comply with the court's ruling by starting the process. The ruling was not that we submit, just that we start the process.
Okay. All right, well, let's go on to the commissioners' informal discussion. Are there any reports or information that any of the commissioners would like to share? Commissioner Martinez?
I know Palindrome is taking a lot of our times, but there's still a lot of other stuff in the village. And what I want to do is, in our last PNC, we asked if we could go through a walkthrough on that change of the 5-foot setback, or the 10-foot setback to 5-foot setback. And so what I'd like to do at this time is request the staff to do a study on those variances and start the process so that we can start that process, because I think it's healthy for the village and healthy for the people. And I think we heard tonight that we're trying to heal, and I'm seeing a lot of wonderful people saying and commenting on that. So I think we can continue on that journey.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes, Commissioner Edward?
So it's another fine balloon festival going on right now. And, you know, we pride ourselves as an agricultural community. And one of the things that concerns me is that the greater region at large does not realize that they're going to cut their nose off to spite their face, and there's not going to be any places for balloons to land. And I think that the city of Albuquerque should feel pretty lucky that they have us as a community within to have places for these balloons to land. I mean, we're going to cut our nose off to spite our face when it comes to the economics of it. Every balloonist I know is a very safe-minded person, and if it's not safe to land, these balloonists will not come here, and we will not have a festival. And I would like to think that whoever the leaders are within the Village of Los Ranchos, being the Board of Trustees, the mayor, or the planning director, there needs to be something done for the residents of the village that economically will benefit them to maintain and retain their land as land, other than just an ag exemption. Because you know what? You just don't make up a $500 million economic development thing that happens every year. And you can lose one pretty quick and you'll never get it back. If you take a look at the Arabian Horse Show that used to come here every other year and that used to alternate between here and Oklahoma City, that thing did like $100 million of revenue each year for the city of Albuquerque. It was a pretty big number. They dumped us, man. We are not getting them back.
Why did they dump us?
Because the facilities were terrible. They were not being maintained. The state fairgrounds, I mean, it's a sad looking place, man. And so if we don't get serious about having places for these balloons to land within the internal elements of the city, we can't rely on Rio Rancho because they're growing. You can't rely on other parts of our community to take care of what we're not taking care of ourselves, and the people who are doing it should be rewarded. I think that there should be a balloon ag exemption of sorts. If it wasn't for that land, man, those people are not shopping at stores, they're not eating at restaurants, and they're not staying in hotels.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just to piggyback off of that, the Balloon Fiesta has an X marks the spot. The village could pick up a whole mess of X's and have people that have land so that they can go out and mark to where the balloons can land with permission. Just a thought.
Anything from this side? All right. Well, with that then, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'd like to move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
I'm going to go home and take pain pills. That's a second.
Sounds great. All right, well, let's see, the October 8th, 2024 meeting officially is concluding at 9:28. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Nine hours.
She's still trying to come back.
I should be just about getting up now.
We can do this over again if you want.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
My father's